The witch of the battlefield has stained her hands with northern blood. Every evening, a curse strikes her with bone-gnawing agony. She hides beneath the guise of a bumbling maid to approach the northern physician. Both harbor secrets, yet they sink into an illusion of happiness, until he realizes she is the one who slaughtered his parents. Though the war has ceased, new soil buries nothing but old wounds. Candlelight flickers as the black-robed elder slowly begins to speak. He tells of the great sun goddess Karia. Legend says she brought the first light to this frozen land. People revere her as the sun goddess, offering devout prayers. Knights worship her as the deity of war and immortality. Behind those endless victories and glory lies hidden darkness unknown to all. Endless darkness shrouds the forest in her dreams. She runs tirelessly through the nightmare. Her attendant's anxious calls pierce through the barrier of dreams. She struggles painfully at the edge of waking. A blurred figure in the snow flashes before her eyes. Then her consciousness is pulled completely back to reality. The fading sunlight from the window falls upon her pale face. Warm tears slide down uncontrollably. Meanwhile, at the general store, an argument erupts. Elgen patiently explains that medicinal herbs require proper storage. The customer insists Elgen has substituted inferior goods. Prejudice explodes in this moment. Those words, "Northerners cannot be trusted," cut him deeply. The sound of the door bursting open interrupts the dispute. Inetta storms into the store with fierce determination. She sharply accuses the customer of being unreasonable, firmly defending Elgen's professionalism and integrity. The customer can only leave sullenly. Elgen offers a bitter smile as he thanks Inetta. Yet guilt weighs on him for constantly causing trouble for the shop owners. Inetta sincerely praises his professional skills. Those hurtful words still echo in his ears. Memories of his northern homeland's fall surge into his mind. The scenes of his home shattering in flames remain vivid, and the architect of all this tragedy is none other than the one known as the Sun Witch, Hildegard Elysius. Her name strikes terror into hearts. Legend says she wields magic that incinerates everything, and possesses a terrifying constitution that cannot die or be wounded. After the war ended, she vanished from everyone's sight. Her true face remains an unsolved mystery to this day. Inetta suddenly mentions the royal recruitment plan, enthusiastically revealing she has recommended Elgen to participate. Convinced he is the finest apothecary in the capital, Elgen smiles as he thanks her for her kindness. Yet within, this stirs waves of emotion. At this moment, two black-robed figures arrive silently. They carefully interrogate Elgen about his background. Elgen answers each question cautiously. His sharp eyes catch the cold gleam of their swords. One of them hands him a note confirming the appointment, promising generous compensation once the patient is cured. Watching the black-robed figures gradually disappear, Elgen has already confirmed the answer in his heart. Those are indeed the swords of the Royal Knight Order. The Melmorada royal family is looking for him. Inetta still seethes with indignation over what just happened, but Elgen has already sunk into deep contemplation. The moment he learned of his parents' deaths flashes repeatedly. The Sun Witch's figure looms through the flames, now visible, now hidden. He grips the fateful note tightly in his hand. In his eyes ignites a flame of vengeance dormant for years. The midnight forest is bathed in silvery moonlight. Elgen walks alone on a secluded path. A cold voice suddenly emerges from the darkness. Griseda Alba reveals herself and states her identity. She has come seeking help on behalf of a certain important figure. Elgen immediately realizes she is Inetta's sister. He asks how he can examine the patient. Griseda refuses to let him meet the patient in person. She only describes symptoms of burning pain throughout the body at sunset. After nightfall, the body becomes ice-cold and rigid. Elgen has never heard of such a bizarre affliction. He speculates this may not be an illness but a curse. Griseda appears impatient with his reasoning. Elgen admits he cannot provide a complete cure, but he can attempt to alleviate the symptoms with medicine. He carefully lists the uses of several medicinal herbs. Griseda rarely offers praise, but commends his knowledge. Elgen cannot help but mention his parents, who were apothecaries. They died tragically in the war 8 years ago. He takes out dried lateral bud lousewort and hands it over. This is a special herb that grows only in the north. He explains in detail how to brew it and use it in emergencies. Griseda stares at this unfamiliar herb. After completing his instructions, Elgen turns to leave. As the sun begins to rise, Hildegard slowly emerges from the shadows. Griseda immediately reports on the conversation that just took place. She advises caution regarding this northerner. After all, many northerners harbor hatred toward her master. Yet Hildegard gazes at that retreating figure, feeling somehow that the silhouette seems familiar. Outside the general store, Elgen moves goods absent-mindedly. The shop owner notices his distraction over the past few days, teasing him about whether he has someone special on his mind. Elgen offers a bitter smile and denies the guess. In his heart, he worries about that patient from whom there has been no word. He had thought this would be an opportunity to approach the royal family. Now it seems it may have been wishful thinking on his part. As the sun sets, screams suddenly ring out from within the palace. Hildegard curls up in agony on her bed. The maid reports in panic that the herbs have run out. The medicine prepared by the royal physician is completely ineffective. Hildegard speaks with difficulty through the intense pain, demanding that the northerner be brought immediately. In the castle's reception hall late at night, Elgen sits upright, formal and tense. Though he once fantasized about approaching the royal family, he never expected to be brought here. This unfamiliar castle exudes an unusual atmosphere everywhere. The door opens gently, and Griseda's figure appears before him. She silently gestures for Elkin to follow her. The narrow wooden stairs creak with each step, finally stopping before a heavy door. Griseda emphasizes again that the master's identity must not be revealed. She only asks that he treat the patient as an ordinary person in need of help. She describes the condition that has worsened over these past months. Every night, her master suffers in agony until dawn, though his herbs have temporarily relieved the symptoms. If a cure cannot be found, the suffering will be endless. For this reason, she has a request. At this moment, the figure behind the curtain is trapped in a nightmare. In the dream, war horses neigh and swords clash. Enemy soldiers roar their intent to kill the witch. Blades flash and blood splatters across her face. The next second, the wounds miraculously heal. The counterattack begins and soldiers fall in waves. Those cold eyes beneath the mask sweep across the battlefield. This is Hildegard's unshakable will. Her attendant's voice pulls her from the memory. The king has summoned her and she prepares to go. Sudden, intense pain catches her off guard. Hildegard's eyes snap open, only to realize it was another dream. The pain in her body has somehow subsided. It seems the northerner has been here. Ironically, she who has stepped over countless northern corpses now depends on a northerner to save her life. She rises, puts on her cloak, and prepares to take a walk. Her fingers pause briefly before the mask, recalling Griseda's repeated warnings. Her weakening magic and true face must not be discovered by anyone. But on second thought, no one recognizes her appearance anyway. If truly discovered, she can simply make that person disappear. It has been a long time since she walked at night like this. This floor, which should be empty, has light in the corridor. Puzzled, she pushes open the slightly ajar door and collides directly with someone holding a box, about to leave. Herbs instantly scatter across the floor. Griseda's warning rings in her ears. Her true face must absolutely not be discovered, especially by a northerner. Elgen lies on the ground, his face full of shock. Hildegard falls unexpectedly into Elgen's arms. Both freeze simultaneously, awkwardness filling the air. Elgen's cheeks flush red as he hastily retreats, apologizing profusely for standing behind the door. Seeing her silence, he assumes he has injured this maid. Murderous intent surges within Hildegard, considering if she takes his life now, what will happen to her illness? But hatred for northerners floods her heart instantly. Those voices on the battlefield roaring to kill the witch make her resolve once more. She should indeed eliminate this threat permanently. But Elgen suddenly exclaims, carefully taking her injured hand. After examining it, he shyly releases it, apologizing for his boldness. He softly asks for this maid's name. In her panic, Hildegard glimpses the statue of the sun goddess Karia, blurting out Kaya, a name she thinks of on the spot. Elgen introduces himself gently, saying he will bandage her wound. In the quiet room, he focuses intently on treating the wound. Hildegard demands to know why he is here. Her tone carries unquestionable authority. Elgen explains he is staying temporarily at Griseda's request, pledging to find a more effective treatment. Discovering Elgen has mistaken her identity, Hildegard goes along with it, pretending to be a lost, newly arrived maid. Without waiting for the bandaging to finish, she hastily rises to leave, leaving only a meaningful glance behind. In the corridor, she looks down at her bandaged wound. Such a minor injury could easily be healed with magic. Yet she recalls his focused, gentle face. Those eyes, she must have seen them somewhere before. Her maid Haishi suddenly appears, alarmed that her master is not wearing the mask. But Hildegard notices the maid's uniform Haishi is wearing. The next morning, Elgen appears with swollen eyes. Griseda asks if he finds the room uncomfortable. He quickly denies it, explaining he stayed up all night organizing his belongings. Griseda intends to show him around the castle. Just then, she gasps in surprise. Hildegard, dressed in a maid's uniform, walks toward them from the end of the corridor. Elgen joyfully recognizes her as Kaya from last night, asking with concern about Kaya's injured hand. Griseda and Hildegard exchange a knowing glance. She quickly pulls Hildegard toward the nearest empty room. As soon as the door closes, Griseda cannot contain her shock, demanding to know why her master is disguised as a maid. Hildegard calmly explains how her true face was seen last night. Since she cannot silence him, she must disguise herself and observe from the shadows. She turns the question back, demanding why Griseda brought a northerner into the castle without permission. Griseda hastily explains it was all for the sake of her master's condition. Hildegard expresses understanding of the decision, yet admits to feeling an inexplicable familiarity with that northerner. She must personally confirm the truth behind this doubt. Griseda believes exposing her true face this way is far too dangerous. If His Majesty Melmodes were to learn of this, the consequences would be unthinkable. yet Hildegard shows no concern for that old man's attitude. For once, her body is no longer racked with unbearable pain. She refuses to be imprisoned any longer in that cold room. If problems truly arise, making that person disappear would be effortless. Cressida can only shake her head and sigh helplessly. In the hall, servants gather together, whispering among themselves. Cressida solemnly introduces the new arrivals, specifically pointing out Kaya, the master's new personal maid. Finally introducing Elgen, the physician who will be staying temporarily at the castle. Murmurs about his northern identity immediately ripple through the crowd. The smile on Elgen's face freezes instantly, yet soon someone steps forward asking about treatment for knee pain. Another approaches seeking help for their child's growth concerns. These sincere requests instantly melt Elgen's heart. Hildegard observes all this silently from the side. The cook warmly invites the newly arrived Kaya to help prepare breakfast. Elgen volunteers to go along and help as well. Cressida watches with concern as her master mingles among the servants. The cook remarks with relief that the master can finally eat properly. Elgen seizes the opportunity to inquire about the castle master's identity, only to learn that even the servants have never seen the master's true face. The entire castle is filled with an air of mystery. Just as he wants to ask Kaya for more information, frightening chopping sounds suddenly erupt from the kitchen. A piece of onion flies precisely into his face. Everyone cries out to stop Kaya from destroying the cutting board. Laughter instantly fills the kitchen. No one notices the watching eyes from the shadowy corner. Those eyes stare intently at Elgin's northern face. Kaya stands alone in the courtyard, appearing lost and uncertain. A kind-hearted maid asks her to help collect the dried bedding, yet she clumsily drags the bedding onto the freshly cleaned floor. An older servant then asks her to help start the fire for bathwater. Thick smoke instantly fills the entire bathhouse. Cressida holds up a cloak sewn crookedly and unevenly, helplessly announcing that these are not tasks befitting a personal maid. Everyone unanimously begs Kaya not to touch anything. Hildegard is politely asked to leave the work areas. She grumbles with displeasure about their pettiness, yet her gaze unconsciously follows Elgen upstairs. Elgen is in his room writing a letter to the shop owner couple, expressing deep apologies for leaving without notice, mindful not to reveal any details about this castle. His pen pauses over his doubts about this castle. Spacious yet silent, bustling yet shrouded in mystery. A castle master none of the servants have ever met. He recalls the legends about the Sun Witch, then immediately dismisses this absurd association. He cautions himself not to be overly curious. Any rash actions could endanger the people he cherishes. For now, he need only focus on his duty of treating the patient. At this moment, Hildegard is watching secretly. Elgin has long since noticed this curious cat. Turning back to look, she seems more like a crouching predator. He finally cannot resist inviting Kaya at the door to come in, asking with concern about her work today. After hearing her description, he immediately understands everyone's well-meaning efforts. Cressida appears at the right moment and summons Elgin away, placing a heavy payment into his hands, instructing him to continue treating her master's condition with dedication. Elgin grabs the coin purse and rushes outside, explaining he must entrust the coachman to deliver the money to the general store. Hildegard cannot understand why he would give away his hard-earned pay. The two finally reach the gate before the carriage departs. Elgin, breathless, hands over the letter and coin purse. Hildegard, after running, appears completely unaffected. He suggests taking a walk by the lake behind the castle. At this moment, heated arguing erupts from the gate. A guard sternly refuses a boy's request. Those pleas carry a desperate, tearful tone. Elgin and Hildegard both turn to look with puzzlement. Elgin quickly steps forward to inquire about the cause of the dispute. The guard bows respectfully but insists this is merely a minor matter. The boy Mace explains through sobs that his beloved horse is lost. The horse, named Fen, startled by a snake, ran into the forbidden forest. Elgin gently requests a moment's leniency to search. The guard firmly states, this forest is strictly forbidden to outsiders. Any trespassers will be treated as invaders. Desperate tears instantly stream down the young boy's face. Elgin soothes him gently, suggesting he return home and await news, promising if he encounters Fen in the forest, he will bring the horse back safely. Hildegard observes all this quietly from the side. Mace finally nods in agreement and leaves reluctantly. Elgin turns to advise Kaya to return to the castle and rest, using the excuse that he merely intends to survey medicinal herbs in the forest. Yet Hildegard insists on accompanying him. Elgin can only smile with helpless gratification. Atop the castle wall, a mysterious figure watches them in secret. Hildegard moves nimbly through the forest undergrowth. Elgin wonders why they cannot find any trace of the horse. Hildegard suddenly asks about his reason for sending the money, unable to comprehend why he would give his hard-earned payment to others. Elgin offers a bitter smile as he recounts his turbulent past. After the war ended, he left his northern homeland and traveled, practicing medicine. He was once falsely accused of being a thief because of his northern identity. Fortunately, the shop owner couple spoke up righteously and came to his aid. They took in the homeless man and helped him settle in the capital. Hildegard mistakenly assumes the couple demanded money from him. Elgin hastily explains this is voluntary repayment. She cannot understand this kind of selfless kindness. Elgin in turn asks about her experiences messages before coming to the castle. Noting that she too does not seem to be from Melmarata, Hildegard momentarily does not know how to respond. Just then, noticing something unusual, she quickly changes the subject. Several drops of fresh blood stand out conspicuously on the ground. The blood trail extends continuously into the forest depths. They push through layers of brush and finally discover Fen lying collapsed by the stream. Elgen confirms joyfully that this is indeed the horse the boy was seeking. Fen lies weakly on the ground, breathing shallow and rapid. Hildegard judges it fell from a height when startled and was injured. Elgen anxiously considers methods of rescue, yet Hildegard believes a horse with a broken leg has lost all value. But recalling Mace's tearful eyes, Elgen still decides he must save it. He takes out a small knife, asking to borrow Kaya's apron to make bandages, planning to splint the injured leg with branches before bringing it back to the castle for treatment. Hildegard watches his actions with disbelief, declaring that such futile efforts cannot possibly save a life, suggesting it would be merciful to end its suffering quickly. Elgen insists on doing everything possible for that boy. Hildegard gazes silently at the horse's tear-filled eyes. That desperate look profoundly shakes something within her. Her thoughts instantly return to battlefields strewn with corpses. The memory surfaces of a soldier pleading in agony. "Kill me!" That voice still echoes in her ears to this day. Jolting from the memory, she can no longer endure it. She suddenly snatches the knife from Elgin's hand. As he cries out in alarm, she raises the blade to end the suffering. Elgen desperately intervenes, his hand getting cut in the process, begging her to let Fen hold on until reuniting with its master. Seeing the blood on his hand, she suddenly hesitates, finally sighing and throwing the knife to the ground, asking coldly how she should assist with the treatment. Elgen finally breathes a sigh of relief and begins directing. The two work together by the stream to splint the injured leg. Next, they must remove the branch embedded in the body. Elgen instructs her to press on the wound to stop the bleeding. The moment the branch is pulled out, Fen whinnies in pain. In the horse's thrashing, he is suddenly knocked into the stream. The instant he falls in, Hildegard is pressing on Fen's wound. She can only watch helplessly as he falls. The water surface where Elgen sank gradually becomes calm again. Hildegard calls out his name anxiously. He finally struggles to the surface, bedraggled and disheveled. Yet unable to gauge the depth, he sinks down again. Only then does she realize he cannot swim at all, muttering complaints about this troublesome northerner. Then without hesitation plunges into the icy water. Beneath the surface, his body slowly sinks into the depths. She swims vigorously toward him and finally grasps his hand, using all her strength to drag him to the surface, unable to help complaining about his unexpected weight. Exhausted, she swims toward the shore with him, only to discover her own strength is nearly depleted. Looking at the unconscious Elgen, she resolves to use her magic. Far away at the castle, Griseda suddenly hears a tremendous sound. In the forest, a great tree crashes down, smoke rising. Hildegard uses the tree trunk to finally reach the shore, dragging Elgen's heavy body onto the bank. She herself collapses beside him, gasping heavily. Looking at this disheveled scene of one person and one horse, she shakes her head helplessly. In his unconsciousness, Elgen returns to the day he parted from his parents. His parents gently urged him to remain strong even when alone. Their promise of a quick reunion, a lie, still lingers in his ears. Suddenly, he is awakened by forceful patting. In his confusion, he first asks about Fen's condition. Hildegard informs him she has sent word to the boy, and confirms that the horse is still alive. Soon after, Mace rushes to the scene. The two sit quietly at a distance, watching. Elgen suddenly mentions he never got to see his parents one last time. They perished on a distant battlefield while treating the wounded. Even news of their deaths did not reach him in time. Hildegard recalls his insistence that Fen see its master one last time. He knew full well a horse with a broken leg was unlikely to survive, yet still hoped for a miracle. She falls into prolonged silence and contemplation. The mysterious figure in the shadows seethes at her willful recklessness, not only harboring a northerner but also using magic and causing trouble. Whether past or present, she remains so difficult to control. Heishi carries a medicine bowl into Hildegard's chamber. Seeing she has risen, respectfully presents today's medicinal brew. Hildegard takes the bowl and drains it in one gulp. The bitter taste makes her involuntarily furrow her brow. Heishi inquires about her observations of the apothecary. She recalls his actions of sending money and saving the horse. She assesses him as a fool who nearly got himself killed, stating she needs to continue, observing him closely. Meanwhile, Griseda seriously questions Elgen about the shortage of medicinal herbs. Elgen explains the new formula requires more specialized herbs. The northern herbs he brought have all been used up. The supply carriage only delivers basic provisions. Griseda hesitates over whether to find someone specifically for procurement, yet worries that the more people who know the details, the more dangerous it becomes. Elgen timely suggests a reliable candidate. Hearing the name Aineta, Hildegard recalls Griseda mentioning her this morning. At this moment, Elgen curiously asks what Kaya is doing. She displays a peculiar cake containing fish. Griseda suddenly enters to announce the herbs have arrived, appearing somewhat resigned about Elgen recommending her sister. Elgen explains that Aineta is the person most most familiar with the situation. The Alba Family Merchant Association has the capability to transport supplies discreetly. Grisetta still worries her sister is too young for such responsibility. Hildegard notices the excitement Elgen cannot conceal. He admits it has been long since he has seen a familiar friend, praising Inetta as a delightful girl. Outside the castle gate, Inetta dismounts swiftly from her horse, running enthusiastically toward Elgen to ask about his well-being, complimenting how the castle attire suits him particularly well. Grisetta approaches with striking confidence. After brief greetings, she urges them to inspect the herbs promptly, reminding her sister to return home early once business is concluded. Inetta curiously inquires about the identity of that unfamiliar woman. Elgen introduces her as Kaya, the master's personal attendant. Hildegard suddenly draws closer to examine Inetta carefully, stating bluntly that she harbors feelings for Elgen. Inetta's face instantly flushes crimson with embarrassment. Elgen hastily explains he never said anything of the sort. At this moment, another figure approaches them. Chef Custard arrives carrying freshly baked pastries, enthusiastically offering to host this rare guest. Inetta happily accepts the aromatic treats. At this point, the chef mentions his son has just joined the Eric Knight Order, surely proud that his father serves alongside the Imperial Knights. Inetta eagerly explains that Grisetta is the youngest Imperial Knight. Elgen manages a forced congratulatory smile, politely congratulating the chef on his son's achievement. Hildegard keenly detects the strain beneath his smile. The three stroll along the stream to the previous location. Inetta marvels at the crystal-clear stream water. Hildegard, who has been silent, suddenly speaks, pointing out that Elgen need not force himself to congratulate others, when clearly he holds no favorable feelings toward the Knight Order. Only then does Inetta realize her tactless remark. Elgen gently indicates he does not mind. Living in the capital means adapting to such things eventually. Hildegard says nothing more. Elgen turns his thoughts to pondering the castle master's identity, curious why they would seek out an ordinary apothecary like himself. Inetta firmly believes it is because of his exceptional medical skills. Yet Elgen senses the matter is not so straightforward. A problem even they cannot resolve must involve something unusual. Hildegard suddenly declares this is caused by a curse. Under questioning, she becomes evasive and unwilling to elaborate, only nervously wringing her fingers while repeating this assessment. As Inetta presses further, Hildegard chooses complete silence. Inetta remarks that both she and her sister can keep secrets. If she knew the truth, she would be unable to contain her curiosity. Elgen notes with surprise how dissimilar the sisters appear. Inetta reveals that Grisetta is her aunt's daughter. After Grisetta's parents died, her family raised her, always feeling she lacks her sister's complete trust because of this. Yet Hildegard believes Grisetta trusts her deeply. Otherwise, she would not entrust such important matters to her. Then suddenly compliments Inetta on her charming appearance, leaving Inetta speechless with embarrassment. At this moment, Hildegard suddenly looks toward the castle, stating she must return to catch a rat that has gotten inside. Leaving the two by the stream, lost in thought, Hildegard strides swiftly through the castle corridor, suddenly calling out to Chef Custard, who is busy working. Custard startles, dropping the vessels in his hands, feigning composure as he asks why she has returned so quickly. Hildegard claims the master has an injured hand requiring bandages. A barely perceptible flicker of suspicion crosses Custard's eyes. He turns, pretending to search for medical supplies. Hildegard slowly approaches from behind, softly questioning why he finds the master's injury surprising. Could it be he knows the characteristics of the Knights of the Sun, instantly seizing his throat in a vicious grip, demanding coldly to know who orchestrates this? From his panicked reaction, she immediately deduces the answer. So, he is a spy sent by King Melmodes, using his son's admission to the Knight Order as leverage. She states contemptuously that she could easily take his life, demanding whether the king believes she has outlived her usefulness. Custard trembles as he protests this arose from concern, fearing the northern apothecary might harm the master. Upon hearing this, Hildegard suddenly releases him. An inscrutable smile appears on her face, announcing that her good mood today spares his life for now, ordering him to flee this land immediately, reminding him that Melmodes will not leave witnesses alive either. Custard finally realizes the peril he faces. He flees the castle in panicked haste. Hildegard casually wipes her hands. Displeased with the king's meddlesome ways, Grisetta rushes forward urgently, inquiring mysteriously about the reason for the chef's flight. Hildegard indicates she will explain in detail later. Turning instead to ask why she never mentioned having a sister, Grisetta responds with confusion that she has mentioned her many times, only that her master has never truly listened. At night, in the training grounds beneath the castle walls, a man practices swordsmanship with diligence. The knight commander appears quietly behind him, critiquing that his sword grip remains unpracticed. The man hastily halts and bows respectfully. The commander announces his forthcoming destination, instructing Tyrion to prepare for departure. At dawn, Griselda and Heishi take a morning walk together. Heishi reports that Hildegard spent the day chopping firewood with unusual focus. Griselda feels relieved to see her master's condition improving lately, yet she worries this might be merely temporary relief brought by the medicine. She knows she must find the root cause and a permanent solution as soon as possible. They cannot rely on that northern apothecary's skills forever. Heishi suddenly notices dust rising in the distance. 3 riders gallop toward the castle at full speed. When Griselda recognizes the leader's face, her pupils contract sharply. She cannot believe the Knight Commander would arrive unannounced. Commander Albrecht greets them with a beaming smile. Griselda questions him coldly about why he failed to send notice ahead. The commander explains helplessly that this was a last-minute decision. He then formally introduces the young knight beside him, Tyrion. Tyrion nervously bows to his idol, Griselda. Inside, he feels thrilled to meet the legendary greatest swordswoman. Griselda asks the commander directly about the purpose of this visit. The commander suggests they discuss matters in detail indoors. Upon hearing that Tyrion will be stationed at the castle, Griselda furrows her brow. She questions why the commander would suddenly interfere in castle affairs. From their surnames, she deduces they are uncle and nephew. The commander explains he wants his nephew to gain experience in a safe environment. He hopes Tyrion can learn swordsmanship and leadership from Griselda. Griselda asks sharply whether he knows the castle master's true identity. The commander assures her that Tyrion knows absolutely nothing about this. He inquires with concern about the Sun Knight's current condition. Griselda responds to his greetings with polite distance. She recalls her master pointing out that the king continuously sends spies to monitor them. Melmodes has never ceased his attempts to control them. She looks the commander straight in the eye and asks if his majesty approved this. The commander frankly admits this is true. Tyrion observes the castle interior with curiosity. His gaze inadvertently sweeps across a figure in the courtyard. Hildegard works with her head down, focused on the task at hand. As if sensing the gaze, she suddenly looks up. Those clear eyes make Tyrion lose himself in an instant. Tyrion snaps back to reality, his cheeks flushing an unnatural red. He stammers as he tries to strike up a conversation with the red-haired woman. He begins introducing himself incoherently, but when he gathers courage to look up, she has already vanished. At this moment, the commander and Griselda finish their conversation and exit the room. The commander instructs Tyrion to remain and learn from Griselda. Tyrion immediately straightens his posture and bows solemnly. The commander watches his inexperienced demeanor and shakes his head silently. Before leaving, he leans close and reminds him in a low voice to remember his mission. Tyrion pledges earnestly that he will not fail this trust. After watching the commander depart, he turns to express his commitment to Griselda. Inwardly, Griselda feels she has just acquired another headache. She privately resolves to minimize his contact with Hildegard as much as possible. Yet Tyrion suddenly asks with reddened cheeks about the red-haired woman's name. Griselda immediately feels a wave of pain in her temples. She guides Tyrion through the castle to familiarize him with the surroundings. She instructs him that he need only fulfill his duties as a knight during normal days. The maids whisper among themselves about the handsome new knight. Someone mentions that the castle has welcomed quite a few newcomers lately. Tyrion immediately asks with alertness about the specific individuals. Griselda opens Elgen's door only to find him absent. She says she will introduce them another day. Tyrion can only imagine what the physician looks like. At the castle wall, Griselda finishes explaining the guard post areas. She suddenly makes a final request in a serious tone. She authorizes him to deal with any suspicious intruders. She emphasizes that, regardless of whom he served before, once inside the castle, he must show absolute loyalty to the castle master. Tyrion responds with surface respect that he will keep this in mind. Yet inwardly, he recalls the secret orders the commander gave him to report everything that happens within the castle and to uncover the true identity of Hildegard Alicius. At this moment, he feels brimming with confidence. Just then, unusual sounds emerge from the forest. He looks over with alertness, thinking he must be mistaken, but the deep blue hair and distinctive figure are unmistakable. That is clearly a northerner. Tyrion immediately wants to report this discovery to Griselda, yet he suddenly remembers the authority to act first and report later that she just granted. He finally resolves to draw his sword. He shouts sternly for the suspicious northerner to halt. Elgen, who is concentrating on gathering herbs, jumps in fright. Tyrion demands to know his purpose for infiltrating this area. He threatens that any resistance will result in immediate execution. Elgen looks frantically at this unfamiliar young knight. This morning when he left, he happened to miss the commander's party. While gathering herbs just now, he paid no attention to the conversation behind him. Only now does he realize he has fallen into a deadly misunderstanding. He recognizes the Eric Knight Order uniform the other wears. He hurries to explain his identity as a resident here. Yet Tyrion stares warily at the small knife he holds for gathering herbs. Without mercy, he swings his sword to attack. While dodging, Elgen trips over a tree root and falls to the ground. He narrowly escapes that fatal blow. He struggles to continue explaining, yet Tyrion's blade strikes again. He instinctively raises his arm to block. The sharp blade instantly slashes through his sleeve, and blood immediately flows. He finally understands the other truly intends to take his life. At this critical moment, Hildegard arrives arrives like the wind. With one kick, she sends Tyrion flying. Tyrion stares in disbelief at the woman who appeared so suddenly. He hastily warns her to stay away from the dangerous individual. Yet she coldly questions what foolish thing he is doing. If he actually kills the castle master's physician, how will he explain himself? Tyrion stands completely frozen, unable to comprehend what is happening. That northerner is actually the castle master's physician? When Cressida hears of the trouble Tyrion has caused, she furrows her brow deeply. Tyrion feels ashamed beyond measure and bows his head repeatedly in apology. Cressida sighs and admits she also bears responsibility for this oversight. Tyrion wishes he could vanish from everyone's sight immediately. Hildegard focuses intently on bandaging Elgin's wound. Elgin softly reassures her that the injury is not serious. Hildegard states bluntly that his injury causes her great trouble. Seeing her rare, anxious expression, Elgin feels warmth in his heart. Yet the excessive force she uses while bandaging makes him gasp in pain. Cressida appears at the right moment to inquire with concern about the injury. She hopes Tyrion can resolve this misunderstanding with him. The two men exchange awkward glances in an uncomfortable atmosphere. Tyrion stiffly reintroduces himself. Elgin also gives his name with restraint. Hildegard looks curiously between the two men. Tyrion mocks him for his clumsy movements and lack of training. Elgin retorts sarcastically that Southerners should first learn to distinguish friend from foe. Hildegard suddenly agrees he is indeed clumsy, and Elgin complains with hurt about her betrayal. Inside, Tyrion feels filled with doubt and confusion. Why would the Sun Knight employ a northerner as the physician? If news of the serious illness spreads, it will surely cause turmoil. Recalling the mission the commander assigned, he feels even more confused. He resolves to watch this suspicious northerner closely, yet his gaze drifts involuntarily toward the red-haired woman. He gathers courage to ask her name, only to receive a cold refusal from Hildegard. His young heart shatters into pieces in an instant. The noisy scene among the three makes Cressida sigh helplessly. She only wishes for the return of a peaceful and quiet morning. In the darkness of night, a figure in a black robe slips silently into the room. The figure reports the message from Tyrion to the Knight Commander. The matter of the Sun Knight's serious illness and the hiring of a northern physician. A meaningful smile curves at the corner of the commander's mouth. He brings up the matter of the Sun Knight's disappearance 8 years ago. The Sun Knight's sudden disappearance during that battle and mysterious return. Afterward, they became invincible in every battle. The commander states he will send reliable personnel to investigate. The target points directly to the Candaruth Plains from 8 years ago, the place where the Sun Knight once vanished. In the north, the wind and snow howl endlessly. Inside the wooden cabin, a mother cradles a crying infant. A man pushes through the door, shaking off snow covering his entire body. Today's catch consists of only 2 fish. 20 years of continuous war has drained this land of all vitality. The woman gazes with worry at their dwindling food supplies. She brings up how they should arrange for Elgin, who will soon come of age. The man recalls the kindness of that physician couple. So many villagers gained a new lease on life through their medical skills. He cannot forget the hollow look in their eyes when they received news of their child's death. Yet harsh reality forces the woman to consider their own family's survival. The other family they hope to turn to has already moved to the coast. Those with means flee this land of despair one after another. Outside the door, Elgin hears every word. In the frozen landscape, he shoulders a simple pack. A child runs after him to ask where he is going. The child asks innocently whether there are sea monsters in the south. Elgin gazes at the southern sky and answers softly. There are splendid nobles and fearless knights there, and the witch he has sworn to find. The child does not understand why he wants to see a witch. He can only respond with a bitter smile. He turns and embarks on the long journey of revenge. At this moment, at the castle gate, Tyrion probes the guards. He wants to gather information, but repeatedly hits walls. He complains that everyone in this castle is difficult to approach. He suddenly notices Inetta arriving on horseback. He immediately steps forward to block her path. He questions why this child appears here. Inetta timidly explains she was sent by Elgin. Tyrion mocks that the northerner is indeed incompetent to entrust important matters to a child. Elgin's voice suddenly sounds from the side. He points out that Inetta does not need his help. Tyrion becomes thoroughly infuriated by his arrogance. He threatens to relieve him of an arm as a lesson. Elgin responds coldly to his provocation. Inetta becomes frightened and flustered by the murderous tension between the two. Cressida's stern rebuke freezes both men instantly. She questions why Elgin provokes when he clearly cannot fight. She turns to scold Tyrion for being rude to the medicine deliverer. The two men who were just at each other's throats now flee in embarrassment. Inetta recalls how her older sister told her last time to return immediately after completing her task. She timidly indicates she should leave now that she has delivered the items. Yet Cressida makes the unprecedented gesture of inviting her to chat in the office. A flattered gleam instantly blooms in Inetta's eyes. Tyrion follows behind Hildegard like an eager puppy. He offers eagerly to help carry the meal for the castle master, only to receive an icy refusal from Hildegard. He still follows persistently to the staircase, until she reminds him that the upper floors are off limits. Tyrion can only retreat reluctantly for now. Hildegard secretly observes his behavior from the staircase corner. She then carries the food upstairs. orders. Heishi looks astonished to see her master personally bringing the meal. Hildegard complains that the blonde boy is truly annoying. The two analyze that he is clearly a spy sent by the king. Yet as the commander's nephew, he cannot be easily expelled. Hildegard points out that the king deliberately conceals her identity. He wants to control her, yet fears she will build her own power base. Heishi mentions that the Whitethorn family suffered devastating losses during the war. Tyrion likely lost many of his older siblings. At this moment, Tyrion worries about gathering intelligence. He suddenly thinks he can investigate the illness through the medicine. He runs excitedly to find Elgen. Seeing this, Elgen hastily tries to retreat into his room. Tyrion quickly wedges his foot in the doorway to prevent him from closing the door. He demands indignantly why Elgen always treats him this way. Elgen insists that outsiders are forbidden from entering the pharmacy. Tyrion then shyly inquires about Kaya. Elgen describes her as an exceptionally honest person. He adds a final jab that she is at least better than Tyrion. The door slams shut in Tyrion's face. Memories of being rejected throughout his life flood his mind. The shame and frustration of hitting another wall here nearly overwhelms him. Inetta enters her older sister's office with great caution. She surveys with curiosity this space she enters for the first time in years of separation. She inadvertently knocks over a neatly stacked pile of books on the desk. Griselda softly asks her to sit down nearby. Inetta sits stiffly in the chair with anxiety churning inside. She recalls previous visits to the castle when she was always turned away at the door. She does not understand why her older sister suddenly invites her inside this time. Griselda actually feels awkward because she has nothing to say. She impulsively asked Inetta to stay because of something Hildegard said. She resorts to asking about their parents and the family situation. Inetta quickly replies that their parents miss her greatly and hope she will visit home often. The air falls into suffocating silence once more. Inetta hastily mentions Elgen to break the tension. Griselda takes the opportunity to ask how they became acquainted. Inetta's cheeks instantly flush red. Her thoughts drift back to that afternoon 2 years ago. She walked along the road dejected, carrying a gift she had prepared for her older sister. Once again, she had been stopped outside the castle gates. A vagrant's hateful curses caught her attention. Under the bridge sat the discriminated northern youth. Elgen stared at the river water in exhausted contemplation. He had spent all his money on travel expenses, yet still lost his way. He had no idea where he would stay tonight. He recalled the warm invitation from the couple at the general store. He began to question the meaning of his arduous journey to the capital. Inetta leaned over from the bridge to greet him. Those clear eyes held not a trace of discrimination. Elgen gathered courage to ask for directions to the general store, only to receive the bad news that it would take several hours to walk there. Inetta noticed the stagnant despair in his eyes. She immediately took out the pastries she had intended for her older sister. She warmly invited him to eat while sharing stories. Elgen finally showed a genuine smile he had not displayed in so long. Inetta was also moved by Elgen's smile. The two chatted happily under the bridge. The memory ends, and Inetta says they only met thanks to her older sister. Griselda recalls that Elgen mentioned his parents who died in the war. Heishi suddenly enters to announce that dinner time has arrived. Inetta hurriedly stands to take her leave. Yet Griselda makes the unprecedented gesture of inviting her to join them for dinner. Inetta feels so delighted she can hardly speak. Inside, she feels thrilled to see Elgen and Kaya again. Griselda watches her younger sister's flustered state with a slight smile. Tyrion runs excitedly to Kaya to share news. The castle will host a welcome banquet for him tonight. Yet Hildegard notices Elgen approaching. She turns to meet the northern apothecary. Hildegard carefully removes herb fragments from his hair. She softly tells him not to move. The close contact makes Elgen avert his gaze uncomfortably. Her focused expression makes his heartbeat quicken slightly. The two then naturally walk away side by side. Tyrion remains standing awkwardly in place. He bends to pick up the discarded herb. He resolves to begin his investigation from this clue. In the dining hall, everyone busily prepares for the banquet. Hildegard presents the dish she prepared and invites the cook to taste it. After tasting, the cook simply freezes in place. Griselda enters the dining hall with Tyrion. Tyrion glances coldly in Elgen's direction. Hildegard keenly notices this hostile gaze. The table full of delicacies amazes both Elgen and Inetta. Griselda asks whether this differs from northern cuisine. Elgen responds bashfully that he has never received such hospitality. Tyrion suddenly proclaims loudly in praise of Griselda's achievements. He extols how she eliminated northerners who did not know their place. These words make both Elgen and Inetta freeze simultaneously. He continues recounting his family's sacrifices during the war. His older brothers participated in many renowned battles. He regrets that he could not establish his own military achievements. His tone carries regret that the northerners were not completely driven out. Elgen's expression darkens instantly like iron. Tyrion's words instantly freeze the lively dining table. Elgen suppresses his emotions and suggests changing the subject, yet Tyrion presses forward relentlessly, refusing to stop. He mocks that Northerners should feel guilty for starting the war. Elgen finally cannot restrain himself from refuting those accusations of plunder. He points out that Melmorata has always coveted the North's mineral resources. Tyrion slams the table in anger and loudly disputes this. Elgen again requests they cease this meaningless argument. Yet Tyrion accuses him of being a hypocrite. He condemns how Northerners sit here shamelessly. He roars that seeing a Northerner's face makes him feel sick. He demands whether Elgen could remain so calm facing those who killed his family. Elgen stands abruptly, eyes blazing with fury. Yet at the final moment, he chooses restraint and withdrawal. He politely asks everyone to enjoy their meal and turns to leave the table. Griseda observes this dispute in silence throughout. Tyrion sneers dismissively that he is a coward. Hildegard immediately rises and follows after him. Tyrion calls out her name anxiously. He does not understand why everyone favors that Northerner. Griseda finally speaks in a cold voice. She questions whether Elgen himself harmed his family members. Tyrion frantically defends that this is merely a knight's position. Griseda points out this completely contradicts the spirit of knighthood. Much less can it be called honorable conduct. As family members of the same castle, he shows no consideration. He ruins the atmosphere during a rare family meal. She admits she once harbored doubts about that Northerner as well, yet he has consistently fulfilled his duties diligently in treating the castle master. This alone suffices to earn him the right to sit here. She sternly rebukes him for using her as an excuse. She sighs and acknowledges that 5 years truly cannot easily heal such wounds, yet she hopes he can understand how precious peace is. Tyrion finally bows his head in shame and apologizes. Griseda reminds him that she is not the one who deserves his apology. Hildegard searches anxiously for that figure in the darkness of night. She finally spots that solitary silhouette in the darkness. His figure standing alone causes a sharp pang in her heart. Elgen processes alone the composure he forced himself to maintain moments ago. He turns to find Hildegard standing quietly behind him. He feels guilty for ruining the anticipated banquet, yet he does not know how to explain the turmoil inside. Hildegard perceives the emotions he hides by turning his face away. She makes the excuse that she also enjoys evening walks and stays with him. The two fall into peaceful silence beneath the starry sky. She suddenly brings up the past he had inquired about before. She confesses that she was separated from her family since childhood and has no memories. She only came to Melmorata later by following others. Therefore, she does not truly understand the pain of losing loved ones. She only vaguely recalls the alienation of not belonging here. These words deeply touch Elgen's memories of wandering. She says softly that his arrival changed the atmosphere of the castle. She also conveys the gratitude the castle master cannot express personally. These words profoundly move Elgen's heart. He realizes he has actually developed attachment to this place. He feels a measure of comfort in this place that needs him. He finally calms his emotions and suggests returning to the castle. On the return journey, they suddenly encounter Tyrion face to face. Tyrion gives him a complicated look and departs in silence. Yet after passing by, he suddenly stops and apologizes in a low voice. Elgen invites him to return and enjoy the carefully prepared dinner. Tyrion awkwardly accepts, citing knightly courtesy as his reason. Hildegard watches them and reflects that they are truly two fools. Elgen suddenly leans close to her ear and whispers his thanks. The warm breath makes her freeze instantly in place. As he walks toward the banquet, his heart fills with new understanding. He feels grateful to have met kind people in Melmorata. He need not vent his resentment on irrelevant matters. The true target of his revenge is only one person, the one called the Sun Witch. As the sun sets, a carrier pigeon soars across the sky into the castle. The knight commander retrieves the small vial from its leg. The vial contains that crucial herb. Griseda extracts a sealed letter bearing the royal crest from the pigeon's message tube. After reading the royal command, she furrows her brow. Hildegard changes her clothes. Griseda reminds her quietly that the summons has been delayed too long. Rather than worrying daily about a sudden royal visit, it would be better to take the initiative and maintain control. Hildegard considers for a moment, then finally instructs softly to prepare the carriage. When Elgen learns the castle master will go out, his eyes fill with astonishment. Griseda explains that the personal attendant will accompany and care for the master. Tyrion will assume full responsibility for guarding the castle today. Elgen urgently requests to accompany them in his capacity as physician. He worries that the journey's jolting might trigger symptoms. Tyrion also hastily requests to accompany them. Griseda's brow furrows deeply as the two argue. She sharply rebukes them to stop speaking useless nonsense. As she turns, her cloak cuts a sharp arc through the air. She leaves behind two men who exchange bewildered looks. Elgen watches the departing carriage and falls into contemplation. What matter would cause the reclusive castle master to suddenly venture out? A distance requiring 1 day's round trip points toward a certain speculation. Tyrion repeatedly polishes his sword. The tedious guard duty makes him feel uncomfortable throughout. He suddenly turns his curiosity toward Elgen, who reads quietly. He probes again about his true feelings toward Kaya. His tone carries unwilling probing. Elgen closes his book to avoid this topic. He states that ultimately Ultimately, this depends on Kaya's own feelings. Just as Tyrion wants to continue questioning, he suddenly freezes. Unusual thick smoke rises on the distant horizon. Inetta gallops toward them carrying mace. The boy in her arms chokes out news of a massive fire in the village. Many villagers are injured but cannot find a physician. Elgen immediately turns to retrieve his medicine chest, yet Tyrion steps across to block his path. He insists they cannot abandon their posts with Griseda absent. What if someone exploits this vulnerability to infiltrate the castle? Upon hearing of the fire, the cook's face turns deathly pale instantly. She trembles as she asks about her younger brother and his wife's safety. Elgin looks at Tyrion and urges him to make a decision quickly. Fine beads of sweat appear on Tyrion's forehead. He finally grits his teeth and removes the cloak symbolizing his duty. He orders loudly to summon all servants to help. He tells Elgin to take the medicine and depart first. As he turns, he suddenly asks Elgin seriously whether he has personally witnessed such fierce flames before. After receiving a negative answer, his expression grows even graver. He reminds him that he must immediately summon all his strength. Elgin rides swiftly through the night with mace. He asks softly about Fenn's condition, only to receive a heartbreaking answer. He suddenly pulls the reins tight, the scene before him making him hold his breath in shock. The entire village burns agonizingly in raging flames. Mace's father staggers forward to meet them, yet Elgin stands frozen, unable to tear his gaze away. He is then urgently pulled toward the corner where the injured gather. Rising and falling groans tear through the night silence. A mother trembles as she uncovers the cloth on her son's arm. The horrific burn makes Elgin freeze instantly. He asks frantically about water sources, only to receive a desperate reply. The mother begs him desperately to save her child no matter what. His fingers gripping the medicine chest turn white from the force. The severely injured far exceed what he imagined. The limited medicinal supplies are utterly insufficient to address this catastrophe. A tremendous crash of collapsing buildings suddenly sounds behind him. Women's screams and children's cries interweave together. Another mother kneels to beg him to treat her son. A man shakes his rigid shoulders in anger. He demands why Elgin does nothing when he is supposedly a physician. Yet Elgin cannot respond with even a single word. His body begins trembling violently beyond his control. The man finally pushes him away in fury. He roars that they will have to find their own way to survive. Tyrion directs everyone to prevent the fire from spreading. Inetta notices that fleeing figure. Elgin curls up in a corner, clutching his aching head. The voice of the village elder announcing the deaths echoes in his memory. His parents' fate at the Kandaruth Plains replays before his eyes. Inetta searches anxiously and asks about his condition. He chokes out his confession of fear toward flames. Inetta encourages him to try once more for the sake of the injured. He finally breaks down and howls out the deeply buried truth. His parents were captured and burned alive as sacrifices. All suffering stems from that sun witch. Hildegard, wearing her cloak, approaches at precisely this moment. That bone-deep hatred makes her eyes widen instantly. Time returns to midday when they arrived hastily. The royal capital guards inform them that the king has gone out on inspection. Griseda clenches her fist and suppresses the disappointment in her heart. Hildegard removes her disguise and breathes a long sigh of relief. She complains quietly about this futile journey. Yet Griseda suddenly notices thick smoke in the distance. She encounters a servant carrying water buckets rushing toward the fire. She learns of the village fire and the rescue efforts. When she hears that Inetta is also at the scene, her expression changes drastically. Hildegard leaps from the carriage without hesitation. She instructs Griseda to take Haishi back to the castle first. She runs alone toward the disaster site where flames blaze skyward. Inetta's concerned inquiry suddenly reaches her ears. Immediately following is Elgin's hatred suppressed for years. That curse against the Sun Witch makes her entire body turn ice cold. Tyrion's roar shatters the frozen atmosphere. He demands why Elgin hides here evading responsibility. Inetta anxiously tries to bring him back to treat the wounded, yet she feels powerless because of her own identity as a Melmoritan. Elgin trembles as he admits his powerlessness. Tyrion reproaches him that he was the one who insisted on coming to save people. Hildegard suddenly emerges slowly from the shadows. She says softly that if he does not want to go, he does not have to. No one here has the right to demand his sacrifice. Elgin stares blankly at her clear eyes. In the distant firelight, his parents' figures resolutely facing death appear. He finally takes a deep breath and straightens his spine. He states firmly that he will certainly regret it if he does not go now. After exchanging glances with Tyrion, he rushes toward the fire. Griseda arrives hastily. She reminds Hildegard that she cannot attract attention from bystanders. Hildegard shakes her head bitterly. The sun goddess's magic cannot extinguish flames that have already ignited, unless she becomes a true deity. Griseda drapes the cloak over her. She turns to join the rescue team. Hildegard stares alone at her own hands. That curse of hatred echoes repeatedly in her ears. Dawn finally descends upon this scorched earth. The fire is finally completely extinguished. Elgin rests wearily beside the injured, with his eyes closed. Tyrion gently wakes him and suggests returning to the castle. A village representative hurries to catch up, hesitating to speak. Elgin assumes the person intends to blame him for his breakdown, yet the villager apologizes for last night's rudeness. He admits frankly that everyone panics in the face of disaster. Yet Elgin's eventual return to provide aid inspires gratitude. This sincere gratitude sends warmth flowing through Elgin's heart. They gaze at their homes reduced to ashes and sigh softly. They worry that rebuilding will require extensive time and resources. The villager smiles bitterly and says they can only appeal to the capital for aid. Yet he dares not hope that urban nobility will care about a remote village. Hildegard quietly beckons to Tyrion. She whispers the castle master's decision in his ear. Tyrion confirms this promise in shock at its authenticity. He immediately straightens his posture and announces the aid to the villagers. Griselda freezes in place instantly upon hearing this news. She pins Tyrion against a tree and demands sternly. Tyrion hastily explains he is merely conveying Kaya's instructions. Only then does Griselda reluctantly release him. She also praises his skilled command during the firefighting. Tyrion admits frankly that he participated in fire rescue during his apprenticeship. Griselda finally acknowledges his judgment from yesterday. Yet Tyrion attributes the credit to Elgin's persuasion. Griselda points out solemnly that the responsibility should rightfully rest with him. She feels gratified that he understands how to take responsibility for his own actions. Tyrion becomes so moved he can barely speak coherently. Ainetta rubs her sleepy eyes searching for Elgin's figure. She sees him discussing follow-up treatment arrangements with the villagers. Hildegard appears quietly behind Ainetta. She inquires about the conversation she heard last night. Ainetta hesitates as she recounts Elgin's memories of his parents. Hildegard suddenly grips her hand tightly. She implores her to keep the secret from Griselda. She worries the Night Order will endanger Elgin's safety. Only now does Ainetta realize the gravity of the situation. She feels annoyed that Kaya suspects she would inform her older sister. Hildegard finally understands the reason for that sense of familiarity. Could it be that she made eye contact while killing his parents? She immediately denies this terrible thought. She has no memory of ever killing the physician couple. But what if that accusation is true? Her body that stayed awake all night suddenly feels a wave of weakness. She recalls the medicine she has not yet taken today. Under no circumstances can she lose this apothecary now. The worst scenario would be if the news reaches the king's ears. She resolves to conceal this temporarily until the truth is revealed. Elgin turns back and shows her a warm smile. She responds softly, knowing in her heart that she still needs this northerner. 8 years ago, on the Kandaruth Plains, Griselda's fingertips unconsciously trace the notches on her sword sheath. Inez's cheerful voice pierces through the dust of years. She takes the well-maintained sword from Griselda's hands. She playfully teases Griselda about her commoner origins and ambitions. She confidently declares herself the true right hand of the Knights of the Sun. Diane helplessly stops her excessive joking. Yet Inez dreams of a future earning glory on the battlefield. She bounces toward that silent military tent while fantasizing. Dim light inside the tent outlines a blurred figure. Inez carefully places the sword in its designated position. Noticing the untouched lunch, she inquires softly. The figure in darkness maintains a deathly silence. Inez emerges from the tent with a rare, confused expression. She describes the leader's unusual state today to Griselda. The assembled army stands in formation on the plains, waiting. Dusk approaches, yet no order to march comes. Inez anxiously watches the closed tent entrance. The knight commander, who should be commanding at the front, suddenly appears. She walks straight into that silent tent. The three knights exchange uneasy, doubtful glances. When the tent flap opens, the emerging figure brings the entire army to attention. The commander's voice rings across the plains, issuing orders on behalf of another. Battle determination ignites in their eyes as they fasten their helmets. Elgin's call pulls Griselda back to reality. She hastily conceals her momentary distraction. She informs him that Tyrion has returned to his southern hometown on business. Elgin requests permission to transport pain relief medicines to the village. Griselda absent-mindedly tells him to decide for himself. Hildegard sits alone on a cargo box, lost in thought. Matters concerning the physician couple swirl through her mind. Elgin finishes counting supplies and prepares to depart. Yet he sees her still immersed in chaotic thoughts. He mistakenly assumes she worries about the village situation. He suddenly proposes they secretly leave the castle to clear their minds. Hildegard is surprised by this bold invitation. After a moment's hesitation, she decides to go along. Morning light gently bathes the winding country road. Elgin describes his parents' eye colors in detail. He says his mother's eyes match his own, while his father's are bright gray. Hildegard stares at his face absent-mindedly. That sense of familiarity stems from far more than mere physical resemblance. Elgin cannot understand why she suddenly shows such interest in eye color. Tyrion's probing question echoes inexplicably in his ears. It makes him involuntarily conscious of her gaze. He recalls her strange curiosity when he first arrived at the castle. At this moment, he especially wants to know how she views him now. A sudden jolt from the cart interrupts this reverie. An old woman crouches painfully by the roadside, gasping for breath. Elgin immediately dismounts and inquires about her condition with concern. The old woman swats away his extended hand with disgust. Hildegard coldly urges him not to meddle. Elgen still insists on escorting her as a physician. The old woman mocks that a northerner would actually help the elderly. She admits her foot injury is a lingering problem from the fire. She ultimately accepts this kindness reluctantly. Hildegard wants to hear no more of this awkward talk. She suddenly scoops up the old woman in her arms. Ignoring the startled cry, she runs directly toward the mountain base. Meanwhile, Griseda remains trapped in war memories. The bloody scent of Candaruth Plains strikes her face. Anxiety over the unfavorable battle spreads through the army. Soldiers whisper that the Knights of the Sun have pushed too deep into enemy lines. They question why no destructive magic is being used today. Blinding light suddenly engulfs the entire battlefield. That figure vanishes completely within the radiance. A meteor hammer whistles toward her with deadly intent. The impact against Griseda's block numbs the web of her hand. The next heavy blow crashes brutally into her side. Inez slashes through the deadly chain just in time. She roars the order for all forces to retreat to Eiffeldorn. Griseda clutches her bleeding wound but refuses to retreat. She continues searching for that vanished figure. A toppling teapot pulls her back to the castle reality. The maid frantically wipes up the spilled tea. Griseda apologizes in a daze that she was distracted. When turning, she carelessly collides with a hard corner of the wall. The maids whisper among themselves about her unusual behavior today. Heishi observes everything thoughtfully from the corner. Griseda slowly opens her eyes in searing pain. Inez's anxious face gradually becomes clear in her blurred vision. She weakly asks about the final outcome of that battle. Inez gravely informs her that the Knights of the Sun have vanished. The Northern Army occupies the plains, and border castles fall one after another. They must retreat to Eiffeldorn until the leader's whereabouts are found. Griseda struggles to ask about Knight Diane's location. Inez's silence proves more heartbreaking than any answer could be. She gently reminds Griseda that her severe injuries prevent further combat. Griseda admits this suits her wishes perfectly. Thoughts of her young sister, left in the capital, stir, longing in her heart. She vowed to return safely before her sister comes of age. Inez also silently misses her distant family. Heishi gently pushes open the door, carrying replacement clothes. She stumbles upon Griseda changing, her waist exposed. That vicious scar makes her instantly remember. She realizes today is such a significant day. Tyrion dismounts at his family's doorstep. His mother rushes into his embrace with wild joy, yet she mistakenly calls him by the name of her eldest son, who died in battle. Tyrion bitterly corrects his mother's address. 8 years ago today, the great battle of Candaruth Plains erupted. It consumed his elder brother's life. Griseda gently touches the scar at her waist and speaks softly. That battle was her first time serving the Knights of the Sun. Before, she was merely a new recruit who never saw the leader. Falling behind due to injury, she held Eiffeldorn by chance. Behind the title of First Swordmaster lies a survivor's loneliness. She has always wondered why Hildegard never mourns the fallen. Does she feel no sorrow for any of this? Elgen carries the old woman on his back, struggling up the mountain path. Her remote dwelling unexpectedly escaped the fire's reach. The old woman remarks on this northerner's kindness. She admits her husband and son died on the battlefield long ago. Her daughter left home over 10 years ago to seek revenge and never returned. She angrily accuses the Knights of the Sun of changing the war's course. They drove 50,000 civilians onto the battlefield in the name of honor. When war drags on, common people always suffer. Her tone conceals deep longing for her daughter. Elgen discovers the water tank has run dry. He calls to Kaya to fetch water together at the river. Once outside, he admits the old woman's leg injury is beyond treatment. That the festering wound has lasted this long is miraculous. Hildegard decides to stay and talk with the old woman. After Elgen leaves, she suddenly reveals her true name. The old woman stares in disbelief, eyes wide. She slowly speaks the name Inez. The memory surfaces of a figure with fallen helmet, barely alive. She says softly she will relay the message that was never delivered. Inez used her last strength to speak her final words. Trembling, she said she had avenged her father and brother. Her voice was faint yet carried fearless pride. Hildegard stands silently listening, then turns and leaves without a word. The old woman trembles violently upon hearing the account. She asks tremblingly whether her daughter died in battle long ago. She learns she lost her daughter 5 years ago. She grieves her failure as a mother. She suddenly demands why the Knights of the Sun would side with Northerners. Hildegard admits she likewise depends on that person for treatment. The old woman urgently warns her to be careful of that physician. Beneath his gentle exterior hides chilling murderous intent. She has seen that look in her own daughter's eyes. She bluntly states she cannot help resenting the Knights of the Sun before her. Had she not appeared to inspire Inez, her daughter could have lived an ordinary, peaceful life here. She wants no heroic corpse, only her daughter alive. Hearing those suppressed sobs, Hildegard turns silently. Griseda recalls the grand scene when the war ended. News of the Northern Army's surrender spread across the battlefield. Griseda joyfully pushes open the castle gate in welcome. She urgently asks after Knight Inez's whereabouts. Hildegard responds to all concern with silence. At this moment, Hildegard's fleeing figure differs completely from the past. Elgen, holding the water jug, calls her name with delight, yet he sees her panicked expression, as if fleeing something terrible. He hurries forward to block her path, asking repeatedly. The old woman's warning echoes echoes in Hildegard's ears. She violently shakes off his concerned hand. Gasping, she says she will return to the castle alone. Ignoring his confused gaze, she turns decisively and leaves. At home, Tyrion's mother still stubbornly calls him Vate. He finally breaks down and shouts his real name. His mother only becomes more agitated, demanding to know where her other children are. She curses madly about killing all Northerners. He grips his mother's trembling hands tightly. His mother calms down and insists Vate come inside. The nanny anxiously urges him to go along with his mother's delusion. He says dejectedly that he still has tasks assigned by the commander. Mounting his horse, he secretly wipes tears from his eyes and vows to earn merit. He hopes his mother and the commander will eventually recognize his worth. Tyrion's cart returns loaded with southern specialties. Exotic fruits never seen before draw a crowd. He generously announces he has prepared gifts for everyone. The servants stare wide-eyed, stunned by this lavish gesture. They marvel at the dazzling wealth of noble families. Elgen comes downstairs and encounters this lively scene. Tyrion stares at him for a long moment, then suddenly thrusts a box at him. He awkwardly explains this is precious ointment for removing scars. He hastily adds that using it is not mandatory. Elgen accepts this unexpected gift with pleased surprise. Tyrion secretly prides himself on the effectiveness of material tactics. He reflects that his previous impatience caused others to guard against him. He concludes money is the best weapon for breaking down defenses. Watching everyone's happy expressions, Tyrion cannot help feeling moved. His mother's mad screaming suddenly echoes in his ears. The smile at his lips instantly freezes into heaviness. Griselda and Hildegard are drawn by the commotion. After seeing the specialties Tyrion brought, Griselda warmly invites them to taste the fruits. Both decline the offer in unison. Elgen watches her retreating figure with complete confusion. Tyrion also notices this abnormal coldness. He anxiously asks Griselda whether something has happened. He hesitates whether now is a good time to approach Kaya, yet he worries that taking advantage would violate knightly honor. Griselda coldly interrupts this absurd consultation. Yet inwardly she too notices those two people's unusual behavior. She wonders why the master suddenly cares so much about village matters. Could it merely be sympathy? The warehouse guard timidly approaches to report bad news. The granary key has vanished without a trace, leaving everyone baffled. Griselda sighs and prepares to take alternative measures. A sudden quarrel erupting behind her draws her attention. Two maids argue endlessly over a missing comb. Griselda goes to mediate. She keenly notices Griselda is not wearing gloves. She only then remembers she could not find the other one upon waking this morning. Upon hearing this, everyone rushes to check their personal belongings. Panicked cries rise and fall throughout the hall. Small items like rings and necklaces have mysteriously disappeared. The entire castle descends into panic over the stolen items. Griselda gravely announces that items have been disappearing repeatedly throughout the castle. She turns to Elgen and asks whether he has also lost anything. Elgen suddenly freezes while searching through his room. The important paper recording the medicine formula has vanished. He hastily explains that he has memorized the formula. A vigilant cold glint flashes through Griselda's eyes. If someone stole other items merely as a cover to obtain the formula paper, this speculation sends chills through her. At this moment, Tyrion arrives with a list to report. Griselda's icy gaze falls upon him. The most likely suspect who would covet the formula surfaces in her mind. Tyrion senses the scrutiny, yet maintains an innocent expression. He helpfully asks Elgen whether he needs assistance searching. Elgen is about to respond when Griselda stops him. She orders Tyrion to guard the main gate immediately. Though confused, Tyrion willingly accepts the order and departs. Griselda gathers all the servants to announce security measures. She requires everyone to move in pairs. She suddenly mentions the ancient legend of Ghostfoot. She describes items and people that disappear without a sound. Everyone turns pale with fear at this eerie tale. Griselda sharply stops this needless panic. At this moment, a pair of feet slowly approaches from the darkness. Everyone screams and cries out in terror. Hildegard emerges, complaining that one of her shoes has gone missing. Elgen gathers courage to speak with her. He reminds her that acting alone might be dangerous. She responds coldly that she must handle matters assigned by the castle lord. Without looking back, she walks toward the third-floor warehouse. Elgen becomes certain she is deliberately avoiding him. Countless anxious speculations surge within him. Did his panic during the fire disappoint her? Or does she resent his helping the old woman? He recalls that she was unwelcoming of his presence when he first arrived. The cook asks with concern whether he needs company. He hastily thanks her and declines. Although everyone in the castle has accepted his presence, only her distance makes him feel utterly lonely. Tyrion stands guard at the gate entrance, bored. Inetta's sneaking figure peeks out from around the corner. Tyrion mocks that she now treats the castle like her own backyard. She retorts proudly that she did not come to see him, that annoying one. Tyrion gleefully reminds her that today is not a good time for visiting. Inetta acts calm and claims she fears no ghost rumors, yet her gaze unconsciously follows those frantically searching. She wonders why he alone is excluded from the search operation. Tyrion feels uneasy about Griseda's earlier attitude. That deliberate distance differs completely from usual. Kaya is already cold, and now even Griseda has become guarded. He must find a way to gather information about the castle lord. Heishi suddenly stumbles while hurrying past with a laundry basket. Tyrion swiftly reaches out and catches her. Ainetta simultaneously catches the basket that nearly fell. Scattered clothing still covers the ground. Heishi thanks them both, blushing. She reminds Ainetta that now may not be convenient to disturb Elgen. Tyrion immediately asks whether something has happened. Learning of the missing formula paper sends a jolt through him. He finally understands the reason for Griseda's suspicious gaze. Being suspected as a spy is perfectly natural, yet that inexplicable sense of loss lingers. Heishi continues worrying about threats from ghosts or intruders. Tyrion suddenly realizes her special position. Besides those two, she is closest to the Knights of the Sun. He gently puts his arm around her shoulders and promises protection. He suggests escorting her back to her room to rest. Heishi accepts this kindness with flushed cheeks. Ainetta tactfully picks up the basket and heads to the laundry. Tyrion decides that since he will be suspected regardless, he might as well seize the opportunity to gather intelligence on Hildegard. Hildegard gazes out the warehouse window at the darkening sky. She feels grateful this silence allows her temporary escape. She refuses to be confined to her room, yet fears encountering those hurt eyes. She regrets volunteering to observe him. Even if he seems familiar, what does it matter? He is a northerner, and she is his enemy. Irritably, she kicks a wooden crate in the corner. Brilliant jewels cascade from the box. Hildegard picks up that deep blue gem and stares transfixed. The color resembling his eyes makes her chest tighten. The memory surfaces of him smiling and calling for Kaya. A mist of sorrow gradually clouds her eyes. Elgen tidies his room absent-mindedly. A sudden call from outside makes his heart skip a beat. He eagerly opens the door only to see Ainetta's bright smile. The fleeting disappointment in his eyes does not escape her notice. She curiously asks whether he was waiting for someone else. He frantically changes the subject and asks her purpose for coming. He apologizes that Griseda does not allow others in his room. Ainetta solemnly promises to stay quietly in the corner. She even holds up the book she brought to prove her good behavior. Ultimately, he cannot bear to refuse and steps aside to let her in. Ainetta gets her wish and curls up in the corner reading. Elgen sighs for the 10th time while facing the medicinal herbs. She cannot help asking whether he worries about the lost item. He hesitates for a long while, then finally makes up his mind. He haltingly speaks of how he has been concerned about someone recently. Ainetta's eyes instantly light up with excitement, yet they quickly dim when she hears what follows. It turns out that person is deliberately avoiding his approach. He begins to doubt whether those pleasant interactions were illusions. He fears asking directly will yield an answer he does not want to hear. What if everything was merely his own wishful thinking? Ainetta immediately rallies her spirits to encourage him. She firmly believes no one could dislike someone as gentle as him, yet she suddenly asks tremblingly whether that person is her sister. Meanwhile, Tyrion strolls with Heishi. He subtly inquires about how long she has served the castle lord. He learns she comes from an ordinary family in a border town. He inwardly congratulates himself on finding an intelligence breakthrough. At this moment, Heishi kneels and begins washing clothes. Tyrion immediately takes the basin from her. He laughs while recalling an embarrassing incident washing trousers during military training. He asks her to rest while telling stories about the castle's past. Heishi feels touched and thinks she misjudged him before. She never expected he was actually a warm-hearted good person. This sincere praise makes his heart tremble slightly. A piercing scream suddenly shatters the castle's tranquility. Griseda is the first to rush toward the source of the sound. The maid points tremblingly at the wide-open window. She sobs about the eerie shadow she glimpsed moments ago. Elgin worries about the truth behind the ghost legend. Griseda stares intently at the window frame and coldly denies it. Those are clearly traces left by an intruder. Elgin feels sorry that Ainetta must leave early. Ainetta acts composed and says this cannot be helped. The ghost foot legend Heishi told surfaces in her mind. Watching the darkening sky, her voice trembles slightly. Elgin perceives her fear of descending the mountain alone. Ainetta steals shy yet hopeful glances at his profile. He smiles gently and offers to accompany her down the mountain. She happily accepts this thoughtfulness but reminds herself not to read too much into it. She understands his gentleness is not special treatment. She then thinks to share a story from her book to pass the time. A white shadow suddenly flitting past the third-floor window makes her freeze. She hastily explains it might have been just the curtains she saw wrong. Elgin instantly remembers Kaya is alone on the third floor. He immediately pulls her along to get her down the mountain quickly. From his anxious expression, Ainetta suddenly understands. It turns out he has always cared about that red-haired maid. Ainetta releases the hand she had just joyfully grasped. She pushes him to go check on the situation quickly. She acts brave and claims she is not at all afraid afraid to go alone. After a moment's hesitation, he finally turns and runs toward the castle. Ineta watches his retreating figure with bitterness rising in her heart. When she turns to face the dark mountain path, she hesitates. Tyrion calls out loudly from the castle wall, addressing her as Kid. She angrily corrects this annoying form of address. Yet, he unexpectedly offers to escort her down the mountain. Gratitude and grievance strike her simultaneously. Ineta deliberately reminds him he should take good care of Haikshi at his side. Without waiting for explanation, she turns and steps into the twilight. Elgen urgently reports his discovery to Griselda. Upon hearing of unusual activity on the third floor, her gaze suddenly sharpens. She immediately orders all servants to return to their rooms and await instructions. She thrusts a dagger into Elgen's hands. Her sword drawn, Griselda's gaze turns resolute. She tells Elgen to investigate the third floor situation with her. Griselda leads Elgen silently up the stairs. The surroundings are so deathly quiet they can only hear their own racing heartbeats. The only stairway to the third floor shows no signs of use. This means the intruder still lurks somewhere on this level. Considering the disparity in combat ability, Griselda tells Elgen to go to Kaya's room first. If he discovers an intruder, he must not engage but immediately evacuate with Kaya. Elgen is so nervous that cold sweat continuously seeps from his palms. His trembling hands can barely hold the dagger as he pushes open Kaya's door. He sees only her figure sound asleep at the table. Hildegard raises her head groggily with clear displeasure. She remains completely unmoved by his mention of an intruder. Impatiently, she waves her hand and tells him to stop overreacting and leave. He urgently demands she follow orders and go downstairs immediately to hide. Watching her still indifferent expression, he finally cannot contain himself. He demands to know why she has been deliberately avoiding him since returning from the village. His voice trembles slightly with hurt and anxiety. He hopes she will tell him directly if something is wrong, rather than treating him so coldly. She coldly reminds him he is merely a physician paid to do a job. She mocks him not to fantasize about a relationship beyond his station. He cannot believe she would reduce everything to a monetary transaction. He thought they had built a genuine friendship. The next second, a sudden disturbance makes them instantly alert. Elgen immediately shields her behind him. He demands sharply that she flee to the safe area on the first floor. She angrily scolds him for acting tough when he cannot even fight. Yet he insists he will never abandon her to save himself. Watching his trembling yet resolute back, her heart stirs. She cannot understand why he protects her so fiercely while kept in the dark. The old woman's warning about the Northerner's hidden murderous intent echoes. She realizes that once he learns the truth, they will surely cross swords. If she confronts the intruder, she will inevitably be exposed. Rather than being passively exposed, she should reveal her identity actively. Thus, Hildegard rushes forward to the front. The moment the shadow appears, she resolutely activates her magic. Yet, upon seeing the other party clearly, she abruptly halts her attack. Elgen, not understanding the situation, still charges forward. The two collide unexpectedly into each other. The impact sends Elgen falling backward. A shelf topples, and goods crash down toward them. He turns just in time to shelter Hildegard beneath him. Opening his eyes through the pain, he discovers their faces are extremely close. Her breath lightly brushes his cheek. His hand, which should be at her abdomen, feels something furry. When he rises in shock, a scratch mark has appeared on his face. Downstairs, everyone worries anxiously about the tremendous noise. Finally gathering courage, they grab tools and rush up the stairs. Yet they see Hildegard holding up a small black and white cat. She announces this is the thief that caused all the commotion. She explains it has hidden all the missing items in the third-floor warehouse. Everyone handles this culprit with mixed feelings of affection and exasperation. Griselda sighs helplessly while retrieving her gloves. Hildegard argues passionately for keeping the kitten. She claims everyone has expressed a desire to keep it. The cook cleverly adds that they need it to catch mice. Everyone chimes in with name suggestions. They finally settle on Ghostfoot because of its white paws. Elgen, bearing the scratch marks, gathers courage to approach her. The others tactfully find excuses and depart. He promises to keep his distance if she feels uncomfortable, but he begs her to at least tell him the real reason for her avoidance. He hesitates and asks whether it is because of his northern identity. She passionately denies this speculation. She admits she chose avoidance because her own heart was in turmoil. These words make his heart skip a beat as well. She promises not to make him worry anymore in the future. She demands he stop wearing that hurt expression. He cannot help exposing her earlier pretense. She knocks him on the head once in embarrassed anger. At this moment, Tyrion learns the news and hurries over. Upon hearing it was merely a cat causing mischief, his feelings are complicated beyond words. From a distance, he sees Griselda returning the formula paper. Late at night, he quietly sneaks into Elgen's room. He searches through the cluttered desk for that paper. When he finally finds it, he cannot decipher the medicine names on it. Heishi's voice suddenly sounds behind him. In shock, the paper flutters from his trembling fingers. Heishi's gaze falls on the paper on the floor. Tyrion frantically attempts to cover up this awkward scene, yet she calmly bends down and picks up the formula. She quietly exposes the true purpose behind his attentiveness all day. She admits she is particularly suited to serve a castle lord who hides their true appearance, not only because of her difficulty remembering others' faces, but more importantly because of that unforgettable past. Her hometown was abandoned by the kingdom amid the flames of war. The bloody scent when the northern army's iron hooves breached the city walls. That figure in a crimson cloak when the blade was about to fall. The heroic form bearing the blazing sun is forever branded in her soul. Tyrion breaks into a cold sweat. She recounts the story of those vanished informants, the knight who fell from the cliff and the cook who quietly departed. She gently asks whether he assumes maids do not understand loyalty. Before Tyrion's eyes appears the legendary ghost foot. His sword hand begins to tremble. Yet Heishi acknowledges the instinctive kindness when he caught her as she stumbled. She reminds him that someday he must make a final choice. She then takes the paper and turns to leave. Tyrion collapses to the ground with a pained groan. His trembling fingers can barely grip his sword hilt. He repeatedly contemplates Heishi's final words. Darkness in the dungeon reeks of blood and decay. A woman with a long braid emits a mocking laugh at the map. The cook held underwater is barely alive. He stubbornly curses the northerners' filthy methods. The man observing finally loses patience and ends his life. The cook has lost his value. They have finally confirmed the witch's location. The calm river surface reflects the faint light of dawn. The fisherman's motion of pulling in his net suddenly freezes mid-air. The pale object floating near the shore is chilling to behold. It is unmistakably a human foot appearing and disappearing. Elgen awakens abruptly from a romantic dream. The pillow in his arms still retains the imagined warmth. Realizing it was merely a dream, he flushes red with embarrassment. All day he remains unsettled by the memory of that embrace. Tyrion's call pulls him from his chaotic thoughts. He informs him that Aineta has been waiting in the courtyard for some time. In the corridor, Heishi greets them as usual. That composure makes Tyrion increasingly restless. In the courtyard, Aineta focuses intently on planting wood sorrel. She excitedly recounts the legend that the first to see it bloom will fall in love. Elgen gently responds to her childlike romantic fantasy. Tyrion cannot help mocking this as childish play. He receives a merciless strike with the trowel in return. Yet that love legend stirs ripples in Elgen's heart. Ghostfoot leaps lightly onto the lawn. Hildegard bends down to admonish the cat not to cause trouble. This assures him she no longer minds yesterday's accident. His gaze unconsciously follows her every detail. The inconspicuous earring on her earlobe hints at unknown preferences. Her red hair flows with a unique luster in the sunlight. Those sunset-like eyes suddenly turn toward him. Time seems to stand still in their silent gaze. She raises an eyebrow and asks the reason for his staring. He frantically averts his gaze, not daring to reveal his feelings. Aineta silently takes all this in. Tyrion rubs his bump and complains about the excessive force. The guard's panicked report shatters the peaceful afternoon. Outside the castle gate, unfamiliar man and woman sit mounted on horses. Tyrion cautiously questions their purpose. Despite their weariness, they carry unquestionable authority. A sealed letter bearing the royal seal is handed to him. They announce they are wizards sent under orders to treat the castle lord. This statement makes everyone freeze in shock. Elgen stares at these uninvited guests in disbelief. The tall man dismounts with practiced ease. Tyrion confirms in a low voice that those two are indeed northerners. Hildegard frowns impatiently. Her gaze falls on the wand in the woman's hand. Elgen recalls the rumors of the king recruiting wizards everywhere. It appears they have met the king. Griselda arrives at the scene hurriedly with attendants. She carefully reads the letter bearing the royal seal. She ultimately orders guest rooms prepared for their temporary stay. The attendant stares up at the woman's height in astonishment. The cook steps forward to take the man's luggage. He politely declines, saying this weight is nothing. Elgen gathers courage to greet the northern man. He enthusiastically asks which northern village he comes from. He receives only an icy glare in response. Aineta indignantly defends Elgen. The horse suddenly rears up in alarm. Lancelot deftly steadies Aineta, who nearly falls. With one hand, he calms the agitated horse. He then gently ruffles her hair. He then silently leads the horse away. Hildegard arrives silently outside the reception room door. Griselda questions the lack of prior notice from the royal capital. Uriark explains this was a temporary emergency decision. Griselda further points out the contradiction that northerners typically shun sorcery. He declares he follows the teachings of Aldumisha. Outside the door, Hildegard's eyes widen in shock. A memory of holding hands flashes through her mind. Uriark continues recounting the ancient legend of the sun goddess's descent. It is a place called the Land of Death at the eastern edge. He asserts that what afflicts the castle lord is no ordinary ailment. It is the body's inability to withstand the backlash of ancient sorcery. Existing medicines are merely temporary measures to mask the suffering. To achieve complete liberation, a special ritual must be performed. Griselda eagerly asks for the specific timing. He solemnly announces that tomorrow is the optimal time. Outside the door, Hildegard slowly lowers her head. Uriark pushes open the door and gently shakes her head at the eavesdropper. Hildegard insists on pressing for answers about the curse's origin and the ritual's authenticity. She says meaningfully that this is divine punishment for crossing boundaries, an inevitable judgment for causing the sun to fall. In the late-night room, the three sit facing each other, each lost in their own thoughts. Griselda admits her confusion, knowing nothing about witchcraft, yet she believes this is an opportunity to set everything right. If successful, both Elgen and Inetta can leave. Hildegard won't need to continue pretending to be Kaya. She worries about the king's true intention in sending the witch. The rushed schedule leaves no time for careful consideration. Hildegard examines the royal decree repeatedly. She confirms it contains nothing more than ordinary instructions. But the witch knows secrets about Aldumisha. This stirs vague memories of holding hands, buried deep in her mind. Hildegard's mind drifts far away. The cook's warning and the witch's words intertwine in her ears. Those assertions about punishment linger and refuse to fade. Yet what finally surfaces is Elgin's smiling face holding flowers. She suddenly announces her decision to accept the ritual. This is a chance to break the curse without relying on him. And no need to keep hiding the cruel truth from him. Griselda gathers everyone overnight to announce a temporary evacuation. Only Elgen is asked to stay behind and watch over the medicine. He sits alone by the hearth fire, brewing the final medicinal batch. He realizes that once the Lord recovers, he will lose his reason to stay. When the knock comes, he assumes it's Heishi collecting medicine. But outside stands the figure who unsettles his heart. Hildegard stands outside, softly asking if she may enter. Tyrion still lingers in the corridor. He is full of suspicion about the witch's sudden appearance. The commander's letter made no mention of this. He hesitates whether to remain silent about all of this. Elgin's heartbeat accelerates uncontrollably once again. In a fluster, he assumes she's here to collect tonight's medicine, but she says softly that she simply wants to talk with him. Then she asks about the brewing method for lateral bud lousewort. He immediately explains earnestly the difficulties of preserving medicinal herbs. She watches his focused profile as she listens. This reminds Elgen of how she thanked him on behalf of the Lord at the dinner banquet. Back then, she looked at him with the same earnest gaze, yet her expression becomes veiled with a faint shadow. She suddenly asks about his plans after the Lord recovers. He says he will return to the general store. Though it's nice there, it doesn't feel as meaningful as here. What's more regrettable is, there's a place he's always wanted to visit but hasn't. She presses on, asking what else he finds regrettable. He suddenly realizes he's always trying to guess the deeper meaning behind her words. She says softly that his eyes seem familiar somehow. He asks with delight if they've met at the general store. She shakes her head but cannot explain why. In the end, she tells him to forget this place after returning to the store. The midnight bells interrupt. Unspoken words. As she bids farewell, a faint smile graces her lips. He smiles as he watches her leave, but his heart fills with bitterness. How he wishes he could gaze forever into those sunset-colored eyes. Late at night, he pushes open the half-closed door and encounters the witch. Uriark casts an eerie shadow before the fireplace. He musters courage to ask how to meet the king, but she asks coldly why she should trust him. Her fingertips trace the fabric of his clothes with contempt. She mocks him for living off the knight's charity. Ashamed, he apologizes and prepares to turn away. But she suddenly mentions the king and the sun witch. Her voice carries a low, seductive rhythm. Whichever one he wishes to see, she can arrange it. The price, however, is that Elgen must do something for her. The cook's body slowly sinks into the river water, just as Uriark prepares to leave. Lancelot suddenly rushes toward a black-robed figure who appears quietly. The figure claims to be pursuing the same target as them. He accurately states their purpose of searching for the Knights of the Sun. As payment for disposing of the cook, he hands over a generous gift. The item bears a conspicuous royal wax seal. There's also a delicate glass vial. Uriark questions the figure's true identity regarding the Knight Order. The black-robed figure evades the question, only emphasizing their aligned interests. In the end, she decides to accept this mysterious gift. Now she holds the vial before Elgen. She demands that he mix the powder into the Lord's medicinal brew tomorrow morning. Shocked, he refuses this request that violates medical ethics. She mentions casually his desire for an audience with the king. She tastes the powder with her fingertip to prove it's not poison. Seeing Elgen still hesitates, she moves to take it back, but Elgen instinctively pulls away. Uriark tempts him, saying he must accept consequences to achieve his goal. She promises to fulfill his wish and emphasizes the integrity of northern people. Late at night, Elgen sits on the bed's edge, examining the vial repeatedly. His physician's conscience warns him to return it immediately. When he wants to confess the full truth to Griselda, he fears exposing his true intention for infiltrating the castle. The horrific scene of his parents being burned to death surfaces in his memory. Yet his obsession with revenge whispers that this is his last chance. The seductive phrase, "the choice is in your hands echoes once more. At dawn, he remains sitting rigidly in the same position. Heishi's knock at the door prompts his decision. Hildegard waits in her room for today's medicinal brew. Heishi reminds her softly that this may be the last dose. Elgen's farewell smile from last night appears before Hildegard's eyes. Hildegard says her final goodbye in her heart. Then she takes the bowl and drinks it down without hesitation. The ritual is about to begin. Uriark stands alone in the empty hall waiting. Heishi comes to escort her to the Lord's room. Hildegard follows closely, scrutinizing the witch with cold eyes. Tyrion and Elgen also follow nervously at the rear, but Uriark raises her hand, blocking everyone's path. She claims the ritual can only have the witch and the subject present. Tyrion, full of unease, prepares to confess and stop the ritual. Lancelot suddenly speaks up, calling Griseda and stating he has urgent matters to report. She's surprised that this silent one actually speaks. She decides to hear his intelligence elsewhere. Aishi escorts Uriark to the door. She insists on hearing the ritual procedure first. She insists the Lord is inside listening. Uriark sees through this clumsy lie. She's disappointed by the Lord's refusal to appear in person. She pretends to abandon the ritual and turns to leave. In desperation, Heishi loudly admits she is the Lord. A triumphant smile curves at the corner of Uriark's mouth. At this moment, Ainetta wanders the streets aimlessly. She's suddenly drawn to an argument between Uncle Liduan and the Merchant Guild. She learns the Northern Merchant Guild has suddenly stopped supplying medicinal herbs. She remembers Elgen urgently needs these herbs to prepare medicine. She hurries to find a horse to rush to the castle with this news. Turning around, she bumps into knights transporting a body on a cart. When she sees the corpse's face, Ainetta turns deathly pale. It's the cook who's been missing for days. The knight describes the brutal scene when they discovered the body. Reportedly, the man and woman last seen with him had distinctive features. These match perfectly with the witch who appeared yesterday. She runs frantically toward the castle. She must tell everyone this news as quickly as possible. Uriark is telling them an ancient legend. She mentions the precious treasure guarded by Aldamisha, the child who swallowed the sun and survived. She declares that humans who steal the sun's power will face divine punishment. Heishi asks in confusion what this has to do with the ritual. She laughs lightly and admits there is no ritual at all. Cold steel flashes as a blade emerges from the staff. The blade thrusts mercilessly toward Heishi's face. Hildegard's eyes widen in horror. Warm blood sprays through the air. The sharp blade instantly pierces through Hildegard's palm. Uriark stares in shock as she blocks the strike with her bare hand. Blood drips through her fingers onto the floor, blooming into crimson flowers. The next moment, magic flows, and the wound heals at a visible speed. Uriark finally confirms that the person before her is the legendary Sun Witch. Tyrion paces anxiously downstairs. He keeps asking why no one has come down since the ritual began. Elgen keeps his head down in silence, cold sweat soaking his forehead. The door suddenly bursts open as Ainetta rushes in panic. Ignoring attempts to stop her, she runs straight toward her sister's office. Upstairs, Hildegard commands sharply for Heishi to hide somewhere safe immediately. She watches coldly as Uriark exposes this charade. She mocks that the other cannot possibly kill her immortal self, but Uriark sneers and admits she lacks that ability. Hildegard suddenly feels a strange numbness spreading through her palm. Uriark proudly displays the deadly poison coating the blade. She describes its potency that can paralyze a fierce beast instantly. She vows to let her suffer eternal torment in the frozen sea. She accuses her of the sin of stealing divine power and desecrating the gods. She roars that Hildegard is the true calamity upon this land. Hildegard struggles to evade the new wave of attacks. The confined space and deadly poison leave her extremely vulnerable. Inside the office, Lancelot continues stalling for time. He casually praises this magnificent architecture. Griseda impatiently interrupts this tedious talk. Lancelot suddenly brings up the brutal Battle of Eiffeldorn. He describes the silver-armored knight who fought like a beast. Griseda coldly denies these old stories. As she's about to leave, he forcibly blocks her path. Griseda prepares to draw her sword. Ainetta's cry of alarm suddenly comes from outside the door. She warns her sister that those strangers are extremely dangerous. Before anyone can react, Lancelot rushes forward. He instantly seizes Ainetta in his arms. He lifts his bangs, revealing 2 vicious scars. He roars about avenging his brother's killer. That brutal battle replays before Lancelot's eyes. His younger brother Raz's small figure climbing the city wall. The moment Griseda's sword struck, blood sprayed. His heart-wrenching roar was drowned by the battlefield's chaos. Griseda asks calmly if this counts as a personal vendetta. She states plainly that both sides entered the battlefield prepared to die. She's willing to accept a duel, but requests he spare her innocent sister. But Lancelot maintains an eerie silence. Hildegard suddenly realizes the true intention behind this delay, creating a hostage situation deliberately to trap her here. This means Lady Hildegard is facing mortal danger right now. Hildegard swings a heavy ceramic bowl at the witch. Uriark easily shatters the object with a menacing smile. Hildegard needs time to heal with magic. Sunset approaches and she hasn't taken her medicine yet. She must end this deadly fight before her condition strikes. She commands sharply for Haishi to duck and avoid the fatal attack. She gathers all her magic and unleashes an earth-shattering strike. The tremendous roar makes the two downstairs turn pale. Elgen finally confesses the witch's sinister demand from last night. He regrets not reporting this vicious plot earlier. Ignoring all attempts to stop him, he insists on rushing up the tower to check the situation. Tyrion immediately follows upon hearing Kaya's name. Griseda demands sharply what their intentions are toward the Lord. Lancelot's arm suddenly tightens as he issues a warning. Inetta trembles as she pleads with him not to involve the innocent, but he mocks her for still being kept in the dark. Memory returns to the moment he retrieved his brother's body. The terror of arrows failing to harm the witch strikes him. Such a being should never have interfered in human warfare. Lancelot is about to expose the Lord's true identity. At that moment, a sword flashes. Spraying blood stains Inetta's hair crimson. Griseda's sword pierces into Lancelot's jaw, but Lancelot actually bites down hard on the sharp blade with his teeth. The next second, he erupts like a beast and violently pins her down. The sound of her sword flying from her hand pierces the air. His blood-filled mouth shows he has completely lost his humanity. Griseda narrowly dodges the heavy fist aimed at her face. She grabs a thick tome and strikes his savage face. She seizes the chance to roll over and desperately reach for her sword nearby, but her neck is seized again by a grip like an iron vice. Warm droplets of blood fall from his pierced mouth. Her bloodshot eyes lock onto him. Her fingertips are mere inches from the target as she suffocates, but her other hand quietly draws the dagger at her waist. The blade sinking into his side makes him howl skyward in agony. She finally grasps the sword hilt and traces a lethal arc. Lancelot's heavy body falls, splashing blood. Griseda staggers to her feet, wanting to rush upstairs to help, but she encounters Inetta trembling in the corner. Her sister's pale face shows nothing but terror and confusion. Even repeated calls cannot bring back her scattered consciousness. She can only pull her sister tightly into her embrace to comfort her. Blood spreads across the floor into a lake of despair. At this moment upstairs, Heishi huddles in a corner with her head covered. The heavy strike just now broke through the wall. Hildegard's attack misses due to her arm's paralysis. Suddenly, Uriark's fingertips slash like blades across her eyes. She is slammed heavily against the wall with a dull thud. The searing pain of the blade piercing her chest darkens her vision. A pool of blood gradually soaks her increasingly cold body. Heishi lifts a candlestick and attacks the enemy from behind, but she is slashed across the arm with a backhanded strike. The broken candlestick rolls to Hildegard's side. She uses her last strength to thrust the metal tip into the enemy's eye. Magic flows through the candlestick, instantly piercing through the brain. Uriark releases the blade and goes rigid. Hildegard gasps heavily. She turns her head and sees Heishi collapsed on the ground. Heishi's arm has been cut by the poisoned blade. Hildegard tears off her hem to stop the bleeding. She bends down to suck the poison from Heishi's darkened wound. Elgen's anxious shouts suddenly come from outside the door. Hildegard freezes as she stares at the door about to open. She quickly braces the door with her body to prevent it from opening. She commands sharply for Tyrion to take Elgen away from the scene immediately. She briefly informs them that Heishi has been poisoned and needs urgent treatment. She instructs Elgen to prepare medicine and summon Griseda. Before he leaves, she adds instructions to prepare the Lord's evening medicine. Elgen immediately realizes the ritual has failed. As Hildegard turns, Uriark utters a curse with her last breath. The blood-red setting sun illuminates her unwilling figure. Hildegard removes her blood-stained dress. Her body glows golden as it slowly heals her wounds. As she sinks into the bathtub, she wearily closes her heavy eyelids. Her erratic heartbeat makes her regret last night's impulsive decision. Late at night, she sits quietly by Heishi's bedside, watching. Griseda reports softly that the bodies have been properly handled. Hildegard asks about Inetta's safety. Learning her sister is sleeping safely in the city after the fright brings some relief. She then feels grateful that Elgen's timely treatment saved Heishi's arm. When Heishi wakes, she deeply blames herself for failing to protect her lord. Hildegard gently scolds her foolish act of risking her life for an immortal. Her tone carries barely concealed fear and affection. Griseda proposes attributing the incident publicly to herself. Hildegard holds her forehead in self-reproach. She regrets showing mercy to the cook, which led to this disaster. At this point, Griseda points out the suspicious nature of the decree's authenticity and the alliance with the North. Hildegard also believes the king would not employ such roundabout methods. She suddenly recalls the witch's shocked expression when facing her magical counterattack. It seemed more like surprise that she could still use magic at all. Tyrion's voice suddenly breaks the late-night silence. He brings a bewildered Elgen to the door. Griseda sternly questions why they appear at this moment. Elgen finally confesses the witch's secret instruction from last night. She told him to mix powder into the Lord's medicine. Griseda instantly erupts with terrifying fury. She demands whether he fed poison to the Lord. He hastily insists he did not follow through. He explains that both he and the witch tasted the powder themselves. He confirmed there was no abnormal toxic reaction. Griseda angrily rebukes him for not reporting this suspicious matter earlier. Hildegard urgently asks where the powder is now. He admits quietly that he threw it into the depths of the cliff. Griseda's eyes harden with bone-chilling coldness. She questions whether he conspired with the witch. She points out that his concealment put the entire castle in danger. Even her sister nearly lost her life because of this. She demands sharply the real reason for hiding the truth. Unspeakable grievances surge within his heart. In the end, he can only bow his head deeply in apology. Griselda trembles with rage, her hand resting on her sword. But ultimately, she only brings her fist down hard on his chest. She speaks with deep grief about the trust she once placed in him. She declares he must leave the castle tomorrow. Watching Elgin's pained expression, Tyrion feels deep guilt rising in his heart. He believes his failure to report in time caused this disaster. Hildegard anxiously pursues Griselda. She points out that Elgen is also a victim who was deceived. She emphasizes that he ultimately chose the right path. Griselda asks coldly what the consequences would be if the poison had actually been added. She questions how to handle it if he conspired with the witch. She points out emotionally the fact that her sister nearly died. She cannot understand why Hildegard would plead for such a person. She asks sharply if Hildegard knows the reason for his silence. Hildegard's heart pounds. She remembers Elgin's hatred toward the Sun Witch. The next second, she suddenly collapses to the ground. The daytime battle has exhausted her strength. In the morning light, Ineta sits quietly on the edge of the bed. After a long silence, she begins washing and dressing mechanically. The water's surface reflects her deliberately maintained calm expression. Hildegard slowly wakes in an unfamiliar bed. She finds Griselda leaning against the wall, exhausted in sleep. She calls softly, startling Griselda from light sleep. Griselda explains the emergency situation when her condition struck last night. The symptoms erupted suddenly, as if she had not taken her medicine. She admits frankly the condition is worsening uncontrollably. They must find a new physician capable of handling severe cases. She instructs her to reduce outdoor activities in the near future. As she rises to leave, Hildegard suddenly calls out to her, but she receives only wordless silence. As the door closes, both understand each other's exhaustion. Elgen sighs quietly at the luggage on the floor. Ineta appears at the door, hesitant to speak. He forces a smile and suggests they go down the mountain together. He feels guilty for involving her in this terrible ordeal. Ineta interrupts his self-reproach with tears. She points to a small wound on her knee and says it doesn't matter. She admits that yesterday's fear was mainly about her sister being harmed. Thinking of that man now, she feels something strange in her heart. She suddenly remembers the urgent news about the northern herb supply being cut off. She hurriedly pulls Elgen to find Griselda. Upon hearing about the merchant guild being targeted, Griselda sways and steadies herself against the wall. Days of heavy pressure finally break through her facade of strength, but she still insists she will resolve the difficulties herself. She asks Ineta not to come to the castle for now. Tyrion silently carries out the order to escort them away. After walking a few steps, Elgen suddenly stops. He turns and proposes to go north himself. He suggests his northern identity might help persuade the herb merchants. Griselda questions his intention to use his origins to obtain herbs. He states it is to atone for his mistakes. He asks Griselda to trust him one more time. Ineta timidly provides the specific location of the merchant guild. After a long silence, Griselda finally relents. She demands that guards must accompany them to ensure safety. Elgen tentatively suggests Tyrion accompany them, but Griselda firmly rejects this due to recent suspicions. She orders Elgen to prepare immediately to travel north with her. She calculates the distant journey and how long the current herb supply will last. They ultimately set a tight deadline of 2 weeks for the return. Hildegard is awakened by the sound of packing. Griselda kneels on one knee and solemnly entrusts the Lord's safety to her. She earnestly asks her to remain vigilant during her absence. She specifically instructs to watch Tyrion's movements closely. A servant comes to report that luggage and horses are ready. Only then does Hildegard learn that Griselda is going with Elgen. Everyone gathers at the castle gate to see them off. Griselda arranges for Ineta to ride her horse. She calls Tyrion aside to give him private instructions. As Elgen arranges his belongings, his thoughts drift to his northern homeland. Hildegard runs breathlessly to him. She asks repeatedly if he is truly going to the dangerous north. After he gives an affirmative answer, she suddenly grabs his hand. She insists he promised to return safely. Fallen leaves swirling in the wind witness this rare, tender moment. He looks toward the seeds in the courtyard that have not yet sprouted. He promises to return before the pale purple flowers bloom. He grips her hand tightly and makes a solemn vow. Griselda's urging voice comes from the distance. He slowly releases that warm hand. Griselda announces their departure. The heavy castle gate slowly closes behind them. In his final glance back, he etches her solitary figure into his heart. They first enter the bustling city marketplace. Elgen and Griselda part ways at the crossroads. He goes to the general store to purchase supplies for the long journey. Ineta sits quietly on horseback, passing through the crowds. Her lowered eyelids cannot hide her troubled thoughts. Griseda notices her sister's unusual silence. After careful thought, she proposes future arrangements. She decides not to involve her in herb transportation matters anymore. She admits frankly she should never have involved her in these troubles from the start. Ainetta suddenly straightens her back and objects loudly. She emphasizes her responsibility as the Merchant Guild's heir. She cannot abandon her responsibilities because of yesterday's incident. The moment she witnessed the cook's corpse, she understood her sister's well-intentioned efforts all along. Now she wants to share their hardships. Ripples of emotion rise in Griseda's eyes. She solemnly states she will respect her wishes. She only asks that if something troubles her, she must speak truthfully. At the front door, Ainetta dismounts nimbly. Griseda carefully reminds her of various precautions. She reaches out to smooth down her disheveled hair. She says softly that she's grateful Ainetta is safe. These words bring sudden understanding to Ainetta. She understands Lancelot's protective love for his brother. It mirrors her own worry for her sister. Those hate-filled eyes once glistened with tears. She wishes she could remain forever ignorant of such cruel emotions. Outside the north gate, Elgen waits with his provisions ready. Griseda rides up and joins him smoothly. She raises her riding whip toward the vast northern horizon. They advance at full speed toward Templeth City. In the twilight, Hildegard writes a letter. Then she watches the carrier pigeon depart, unable to collect her thoughts for a long while. Rain pours down as Elgen and Griseda struggle forward through the mud. Watching the torrential rain, he cannot help worrying about the situation far away. He wonders if the castle is also shrouded beneath this curtain of rain. At this moment, Hildegard stands before the castle window, lost in thought. She holds fabric and asks softly for permission to measure her for new clothes. She carefully unfolds the measuring tape to measure her shoulder width and sleeve length. She chatters about reasons why the old clothes need replacing due to damage, but Hildegard's gaze remains fixed on the rainy scene outside. She comforts her gently, saying Griseda will surely bring back the herbs safely. She murmurs agreement, but Elgin's words surface in her mind. An emergency meeting convenes within Promenia royal capital. Ministers argue endlessly over the standoff between the two great western nations. The Knight Commander calmly analyzes why there is no need to rush into taking sides. King Melmodes firmly believes the Sun Goddess's protection is sufficient to deter all nations. Someone mentions with dissatisfaction that the Knights of the Sun have not appeared for a long time. The commander timely brings up the brief letter from Hildegard. The letter says she has received the gift, but what this gift refers to leaves the king confused. After the meeting, the commander asks if there is any new word from Tyrion. At this moment, Tyrion frowns at a stack of letter paper. Griseda's words before her departure echo in his ears. She has long seen through his true identity as a spy. The warning that the Lord is not our enemy lingers persistently. The commander's orders and the truth before him leave him in a dilemma. If he reports truthfully, it amounts to denouncing this castle to the royal court. If he remains silent, it feels like betraying the commander's trust. Thinking of those warm faces in the castle causes him unbearable pain. An unusual sound from the lawn interrupts his struggle. Looking down, he sees Hildegard crouching on the lawn. Hildegard crouches alone on the grass, lost in thought. Tyrion approaches cautiously and asks why she is sitting here in a daze. She only says she feels troubled and wants some quiet. He asks tentatively if she is worried about those two. She tells him coldly not to concern himself with her, but he lingers behind her like a ghost. Finally, losing patience, she turns and confronts him. She suspects whether he is secretly watching and spying again. He hastily explains he is only concerned because she seems listless. She says quietly she is merely looking for newly sprouted buds. She wants to find the flower Elgen once mentioned. He immediately guesses it might be wood sorrel. He traces the shape of the leaves in the air with his finger. Seeing her confusion, he quickly finds paper and pen to sketch it. She genuinely praises how lifelike his drawing is. He admits shyly it is a hobby he cultivated in childhood. He worries that drawing with hands meant for wielding swords seems ridiculous, but she enthusiastically asks him to draw more. The cat under his pen seems ready to leap off the page. Watching her focused appreciation, he confesses softly. She inexplicably reminds him of his late sister. He quickly clarifies he does not mean in appearance, but in feeling. She asks gently what kind of sister she was. He describes that heroic woman skilled in martial arts. He recalls being mocked by his brothers for only loving to draw. Only his sister praised his drawings. Unfortunately, his sister died in the great battle on the plains 8 years ago. Tyrion's voice fills with deep longing and sorrow. The charcoal pencil in Hildegard's hand suddenly snaps. He calls her name in confusion. Only then does he notice fine cold sweat beating on her forehead. He shifts to asking about her past that she has never mentioned. She hesitates and says little remains of her childhood memories. She vaguely remembers the fiery red sky at sunset, and the scene of everyone holding hands and dancing in circles. He is surprised she is not a local. He is simply curious why she came to this castle, but she asks in return why a child who loved drawing became a knight. If he truly wanted to distinguish himself, he could have gone to a fortress or the navy. Why did he choose to come to this remote castle specifically? Having said this, she rises to get water. He sits alone gazing at the drawing in his hands in silence. The dark clouds from the day of his sibling's funeral reappear in memory. That once cheerful second second brother also departed forever. The family endured the pain of losing 3 children in succession. The once undervalued 4th son was forced to become the eldest. The Whitethorn family once had 3 pillars standing firm in the south. The eldest son, Vate, was the territory's acknowledged legitimate heir. The second son, Anton, was called Monochrome, who supported his elder brother. The third daughter, Mira, held the mighty title of White Lion. They upheld knightly virtues and helped everyone regardless of status. The entire South sang praises of the 3 pillars of Whitethorn. Everyone anticipated their brilliant futures, until the day the second son's cold corpse was returned home. Subsequently, the eldest daughter and third son also fell in battle. The family's hopes were buried along with the coffins. Young Tyrion tossed and turned sleepless in the deep night. The words, "You are now the eldest son," echoed in his ears. He could not understand how these words could make him instantly grow up. At this time, he faintly heard servants sobbing quietly downstairs. The entire estate seemed to sink into a deep sea of sorrow. What worried him most was his mother, who remained shut away all day. The nursemaid forbade him from seeing his mother, citing her need for rest. His younger siblings were still at an age when they longed for their mother's embrace. He remembered the flowers in the garden his mother loved were in full bloom. He quietly picked a bouquet, hoping to comfort his mother's grief. He slipped into the room during the gap when servants prepared meals. His mother sat quietly in a chair, her face haggard and eyes vacant. He presented the carefully selected bouquet like a treasure, but the bright flowers made his mother think of her eldest son's face. She suddenly let out a heart-wrenching cry and gripped the flowers tightly. Scarlet, bloody tears kept flowing from her clouded eyes. Amid everyone's cries of alarm, she bit down hard on her own tongue. Servants frantically carried him from the room. They scolded him for thoughtlessly upsetting his gravely ill mother. The last glimpse through the door crack was of his mother's anguished face. Both self-reproachful and aggrieved, he hid in his room. He could not understand why his care always resulted in harm. His sister Lydia rushed to find him. She brought important news that their uncle had arrived at the estate. Tyrion and his sister Lydia rushed toward the noisy front courtyard. The figure surrounded by knights is none other than the kingdom's Grand Knight Commander. Their mother, supported by a maid, trembles as she approaches her brother. The commander gazes at his sister-in-law's haggard face and sighs deeply. He solemnly promises that the kingdom will never forget the blood its people have shed. He vows to avenge his fallen nephews and repay this blood debt. This oath finally kindles a faint glimmer in their mother's eyes. Tyrion brands this hope deep into his heart. Father hurries over to discuss military matters with his brother. The dreadful news that the Northern Army is pressing their advantage chokes the air. Tyrion clenches his fists and declares his resolve to Lydia. He will personally collect this blood debt from the Northerners. The commander receives his still boyish nephew in the study. Standing before his imposing uncle, Tyrion is so nervous he doesn't know what to do with his hands. He stammers incoherently, arguing that though he lacks combat experience, he is strong and fit. The commander sternly rebukes him for not even being able to speak clearly. He grasps the boy's soft palms, examining them for any trace of training and finding none. In a grave voice, he questions whether Tyrion truly volunteers to replace his brothers on the battlefield. Under this oppressive presence, Tyrion can barely breathe. Yet suddenly, the commander gently pats his shoulder. He permits the boy to drop his guard and be vulnerable in this moment. This rare tenderness shatters all of the young man's defenses. Tears he has been holding back finally burst forth like a broken dam. The Knight Commander's solemn voice echoes across the Oath Plaza. Tyrion joins the others in solemnly swearing loyalty to the kingdom. After the ceremony, he clutches his luggage and looks around bewildered. Connie from the Branch family appears in time to show him the way. Though aspiring to priesthood, he is willing to assist the young master before class assignments. Tyrion gazes up at the monastery where he will train from now on. This royal institution cultivates future priests and knights. Since the Knights of the Sun emerged, applicants surge every year. He resolves to study faith, ritual law, military tactics, and horsemanship here. He hopes to honorably become a member of the Knight Order, to march with the commander and personally execute his northern enemies. 2 upperclassmen lean against the railing, commenting on the new students. They mock the naive newcomers who have no idea how harsh the training will be. Suddenly, they bring up news of the Whitethorn family's eldest son enrolling. Tyrion's footsteps involuntarily halt. They talk carelessly about the family's sacrifices. They call the Whitethorns lackeys who survive by eliminating rivals. They viciously predict the new kid will meet the same fate. Connie frantically urges his young master not to take it to heart. The phrase "already sacrificed 3" completely ignites his fury. Tyrion's fist crashes hard into the other's face. The struck student shouts in shock and rage, calling him insane. Tyrion roars that he will kill this insulter. With his companion's help, the other begins fighting back. A passing priest's flower pot shakes violently from the collision. Tyrion grabs a handful of dirt and shoves it into the other's mouth. He pins the student down and rains blows upon him. The headmaster is discussing educational funding matters with the commander. They are interrupted by a student reporting that new students are fighting. The commander proceeds with interest to observe the situation. He praises the new student who, though young, can really fight. But when he sees the face clearly, he freezes on the spot. Tyrion brings down his fists like a madman. Even when his uncle shouts sternly to stop, he refuses to cease. He pleads desperately to land just one more punch. He suddenly freezes when he hears the address young Master Dean. The commander's reproachful gaze makes him feel as if he has fallen into an icy abyss. That name means he has struck the king's nephew. Outside the door, Connie holds his breath, listening to the fierce reprimand within. The commander's furious scolding penetrates the door and vibrates through the air. He demands to know how Tyrion could cause such an embarrassing incident on his very first day. Fortunately, it was dismissed as childish fighting. Barely settling the matter, Tyrion stubbornly argues that he could not tolerate the insult. The commander calmly points out he should not lose composure over idle gossip. He teaches the boy to learn to strike at the right moment. Tyrion pouts aggrieved but dares not argue further. Looking at his stubborn expression, the commander suddenly sighs with relief. He did not expect the boy's punches to be so fierce and powerful, truly worthy of Whitethorn blood. But if he is truly to fight, he should use a sword rather than fists. He solemnly places the sword from his waist into Tyrion's hands. He admits this gift may be given too early, but he believes Tyrion will soon prove worthy of this blade. Tyrion clutches the sword tightly, his eyes shining with longing. The commander instructs Connie to quickly fetch some ointment. Looking down at the sword in his arms, Tyrion finally smiles. In class, the teacher describes the characteristics of Northerners. Below, Tyrion secretly sketches his imagined enemy. He knows full well those legends are meant to frighten children. Still, he draws the Northerners with grotesque and terrifying features. Solid frames paired with fierce beast-like eyes, sharp teeth that seem capable of tearing apart any prey. He pins this horrifying portrait to a straw dummy's head. He raises the heavy knight's sword with all his might and strikes down hard. On the training ground, the instructor barks orders to pick up the pace. This is only the fourth lap. How can they speak of exhaustion and giving up? Tyrion and Connie are already drenched in sweat, yet Tyrion grits his teeth, refusing to stop running. In combat, solid fundamental footwork is most important. Tyrion recalls his brother's distinctive sword styles. Bate's traditional swordsmanship, steady and heavy as a boulder. Anton's flowing, unbroken, elegant movements like water. Just as he begins to recall Mira, an instructor pauses and praises his proper form. He mentions that the Whitethorn family has always been exceptionally skilled. He particularly enjoyed watching Mira's excellent sparring matches with upperclassmen. The call for regular sparring rings out across the training ground. Dean stretches lazily and walks forward reluctantly. He mocks this amateur for managing to last this long. Tyrion solemnly bows and apologizes for what happened before. Dean shoulders his wooden sword with an unkind smile. He boasts that today he will beat Tyrion soundly. Tyrion takes a deep breath and grips his wooden sword tightly. He recalls his sister's heroic form. Images surface of her small frame moving nimbly across the training ground. Her tactic of retreating to draw enemies in left a deep impression. At the moment opponents thought they had succeeded, she would launch a fatal strike. As clean as a lioness, precisely seizing prey by the throat. He imitates his sister's stance and assumes a fighting posture. But the wooden sword strikes hard across his face. Dean offers a false apology, saying he meant to pull back in time. Blood from his nose drips down his chin onto his training clothes. Tears he struggles to hold back spin in his eyes. The instructor shouts sternly to stop such dangerous strikes to the head and neck. Tyrion realizes the vast difference between real combat and solo practice. His retreat was half a beat too slow, which is why he was hit. He wants to imitate his sister's agility but finds himself unable. The instructor asks with concern whether to end the sparring. Tyrion grits his teeth, picks up the wooden sword, and refuses to concede. By this time, Connie has already finished his match. He assumed Tyrion would have been defeated early as well, but he finds the training ground packed tight with onlookers. Tyrion is engaged in another round with Dean. The wooden sword strikes heavily against his arm. The sharp pain causes his fingers to involuntarily release the hilt. Dean taunts him to surrender early and save himself. Enduring pain throughout his body, he picks up the wooden sword again. He counters by asking if Dean is already exhausted. Dean cannot understand why he persists in taking beatings. Chaotic thoughts hinder Tyrion's physical responses. Blindly imitating his sister only makes his movements sluggish. Suddenly, the image of the Northerner from his memory flashes before him. The surrounding noise instantly becomes distant and muted. His scattered thoughts clear as if doused with ice water. He steadies himself, raises the wooden sword, and takes his stance. Two direct confrontations make his opponent impatient and irritated. He steps back, causing the third strike to miss. In the instant his opponent withdraws the sword and reveals an opening, he surges forward. He ducks low to evade sight and thrusts upward toward the throat. The sword tip stops steadily just before touching skin. Dean falls backward to the ground in shock, his face flushed red. Connie stares dumbfounded. At this reversal, Tyrion himself looks at the wooden sword in disbelief. Connie excitedly circles Tyrion, his eyes full of admiration. Tyrion scratches his head bashfully, saying this result only came on the fifth attempt. Dean's face burns crimson as scattered murmurs rise behind him. Some marvel at the move, while others question whether the noble had training all along. more mock Dean for losing to an underclassman, their voices dripping with schadenfreude. Watching Tyrion's foolish grin, fury ignites in Dean's eyes. The bed creaks faintly in the dead of night. Tyrion buries his face deep in the pillow, wounds aching throughout his body. He suddenly turns over with a brilliant smile, elated by his daytime victory. He relives the moment of winning with his brother's swordsmanship, gesturing excitedly. He firmly believes he has indeed lived up to the Whitethorn bloodline and honor. He fantasizes about the glorious future 3 years from now if he continues working hard. Yet the pain from wounds all over his body makes tears shimmer in his eyes. After wiping his tears, he rallies himself, swearing to overcome everything with strength. He vows to hunt down every last northerner. Thinking of his mother's approving smile, tears fill his eyes once more. Autumn leaves fall, and the portraits on the training ground change again and again. Tyrion swings his sword tirelessly, the blade cutting through the air. Muffled groans of pain come from under his blankets late at night. Connie is awakened by his moans and asks with concern the next day. Tyrion jokingly attributes it to growing pains from getting taller. The wooden sword is finally replaced with a real one, the hilt wearing blisters into his palms. Some mock him for being tireless as if possessed. They assert that noble young masters are all pampered and spoiled. Tyrion passes through the corridor and tilts his head, hearing the gossip, but he no longer reacts impulsively as in childhood, simply walking away silently. After late-night training, he drags his exhausted body back to the dormitory. He figures Connie should be fast asleep and moves quietly, but suddenly a sack is thrown over his head. When he opens his eyes, he finds himself hanging upside down from the top of a flagpole. Dean's mocking voice drifts up from below, saying it has been a while. He asks if the view from this height has a special flavor. Dean announces with a cold laugh that tomorrow will be his appointment ceremony. He says with false sentiment that it will be a pity not to see Tyrion anymore. Looking down from his superior position, he mocks Tyrion's obsession with avenging his brothers. He boasts triumphantly that he will slaughter all the northerners himself, leaving Tyrion with no opportunity for revenge whatsoever. He orders Tyrion to beg for mercy and apologize immediately. Even hanging upside down, Tyrion absolutely refuses to submit. Instead, he taunts that Dean's abilities will not last more than a few minutes. He points out that Dean's status will draw countless predators on the battlefield. He describes how enemies will gnaw on his marrow. He promises that in 1 year he will appear in golden armor. By then, Dean's head will only be able to look up at his glory upside down. Just like this humiliating position now, Dean's face turns livid with rage, yet he has no retort. He finally departs resentfully with his attendants. Tyrion hangs alone in the cold wind, drowsy, until Connie's anxious calls rouse him. He hurriedly rescues Tyrion from his upside-down predicament. Tyrion's legs tremble uncontrollably from hanging inverted so long. Connie worries that others will whisper if they see this. He suggests Tyrion rest until his condition improves before moving. Tyrion says he has long stopped caring about such trivial matters. He continues his brutal training using the northerner portrait. Now he can sever the straw dummy's head with a single stroke. As he grips the sword and catches his breath, flames of vengeance burn in his eyes. Time flies, and Tyrion finally dons his knight's uniform. He carefully adjusts his attire, preparing to return to his long-absent home. In his memories, his mother was always gentle yet kept her distance. That sense of remoteness made him crave closeness all the more as a child. He recalls the time his mother discovered him skipping sword practice. She stood quietly beside him, asking what he was drawing. In his panic, he blurted out all his true feelings. She gently pinched his cheek. She showed a helpless yet indulgent smile. That turned out to be the last smile of hers he would remember. He deeply anticipates seeing that smile again at this reunion. A servant's joyful shout draws his mother's attention. Tyrion approaches in his knight's uniform. He kneels before his mother with his sword, reporting on his progress. He solemnly promises to fight to fulfill her expectations. Yet his mother stares blankly at his knight's attire. She murmurs to herself about when he grew so tall. She recalls the danger and worry of his difficult birth. She marvels that he has always been healthy and steady, never causing concern. She gently touches his cheek and speaks words of pride in him, but she calls out the name of her eldest son who died in battle long ago. Tyrion's smile freezes instantly on his face. The nursemaid covers her mouth in shock, not daring to make a sound. His heart shatters completely into a million pieces in that moment. He wonders if he will ever see his mother smile for him again. Tyrion staggers out of the room, his fingers buried deep in his hair. The nursemaid cautiously informs him that the lady is in the kitchen preparing food. She explains softly that this is merely temporary confusion caused by medication. She firmly believes the lady will soon recover her former spirits. His hopes shatter like glass before the cold reality. The nursemaid tries to comfort him with news that the war is nearly over. News of the Knights of the Sun pressing their advantage spreads through every street and alley. If he can return safely, it should be cause for celebration. These words pierce his last defenses like a blade. If he had known this would happen, he would rather have died in battle from the start. Then he would not have had to suffer such hardship and humiliation, to become a knight. The nursemaid stops this terrible thought in alarm. Lydia stands in the doorway, her eyes full of anguish and fury. She demands to know why he would say such cruel words. Her fist falls heavily on his shoulder with trembling force. Does he want to become like their deceased siblings? If even he were to leave them this way, how could they bear it? He breaks down and shouts about the pain of never feeling cared for. With reddened eyes, Lydia tells him to leave immediately. Tyrion steps away without hesitation. The nursemaid anxiously tries to salvage this spiraling situation. Yet Lydia recalls the small figure from childhood, hiding in corners and crying. She hurries out after him. Tyrion has already ridden away. On the road away, hatred burns his reason like wildfire. He wants to go to the battlefield immediately to kill enemies and take revenge. At this moment, the victory banners flying above the village sting his eyes. The people cheer excitedly. The war is over. Among the celebrating crowd, he stands out like an isolated island. The commander gently presents two entirely different choices: stay in his homeland or go to the capital to await unknown assignments. He chooses the latter without hesitation, the path of distance. On horseback, remembering his sister's words cuts his heart like a knife, but he would rather die in battle to earn even a moment of his mother's remembrance. Hildegard's question echoes repeatedly in his mind. Tyrion finally musters the courage to reveal his deeply buried feelings. He admits the true reason he came to this castle, simply because in this vast world he had nowhere else to go. He once believed the battlefield could prove his family honor. He thought revenge could fill the void left by his brother's deaths. Now he understands these were merely excuses for being lost. Hildegard listens to his confession and lets out a soft sigh. How naive to think one could prove their worth through war. Tyrion admits that the prejudices about Northerners deserving extermination began gradually crumbling after meeting Elgen. Hildegard suddenly mentions that Elgen's parents died because of the war. Tyrion is shocked, yet feels there were signs all along. He recalls Elgen's situation of being alone in a foreign land. He remembers even more how Elgen traveled north to take responsibility for his mistakes. He admits guiltily that he noticed the witch's suspicious behavior early on, yet chose silence out of fear of trouble. He attributes all the faults to his own cowardice. Hildegard sees her former self in him, that helpless figure constantly in tears, blaming herself. She steps forward and gently denies this self-blame. She reminds him to take responsibility for choices made with clear understanding. Always following others will only lead to being forever lost. Only by following one's heart can one be unashamed of every decision. Though she does not particularly like his personality, she does not wish him to repeat the mistakes of her past. She believes everyone will face a better tomorrow. Now they only need to quietly wait for those two to return. Tears of relief shimmer in Tyrion's eyes. His fingers clutching the drawing paper finally loosen slowly. Hildegard makes a request somewhat bashfully. She hopes he can help draw a pattern she cannot draw herself. He hastily wipes his tears and agrees to draw any number she wants. She turns back to look at him deeply, giving rare affirmation. If he does not deliberately try to show off, he is actually a decent person. As they pass each other, she slips him a drawing as a gift. When unfolded, it reveals an ugly yet expressive profile. Recognizing it as himself, he cannot help but show a warm smile. Fragments of past moments with Elgen flood his mind, from initially suspecting the falseness of his smile, to his restraint when deliberately provoked at the dining table, finally inviting him to dinner without any grudge. Those rumors about Northerners being savage begin to waver. Looking at the figure in the drawing, Tyrion makes a silent resolution. When that fellow returns, he must properly apologize to him. He then finishes writing all the letters that have piled up. The message the commander waits on the balcony does not come from Tyrion. A subordinate reports that the item has been found. As Lydia reads the letter, her father asks who it is from. She gazes at the sky with a relieved, warm smile. She softly conveys Tyrion's sincere greetings to everyone. Griseda's knocking breaks the silence of dawn. Elgen buries his face deep in the pillow, unwilling to rise. This is the sixth dawn of their journey to Templeth. He drags his weary body slowly down the stairs. Days of continuous travel have nearly exhausted all his strength, yet Griseda asks the innkeeper for directions with her usual composure. The crowds on the streets already bear the distinctive features of the north. Merchants and travelers stream endlessly, demonstrating the prosperity of this border city. Roadside vendors hawk various jewelry and accessories loudly. A pair of ruby earrings glitters brilliantly in the sunlight. He glimpses in a trance the image of that red hair wearing the earrings. Griseda's call jolts him from his reverie. The surging crowd nearly separates them. News from ahead plunges everyone into dejection. Heavy rains have destroyed the only bridge to the other shore. The suggestion to detour east means more time lost. Elgen looks toward the continuous mountain range to the west. He proposes the bold idea of climbing over the cliffs. After trading their horses for provisions, they begin the difficult climb. The slippery rock face nearly causes him to lose his footing and fall. Griseda catches his collar in time. The ease with which she pulls him back to safety is astonishing. He smiles bitterly, saying he is actually fairly good at climbing. He recalls childhood memories of gathering medicinal herbs with his parents. Griseda softly praises the excellence of his parents. The setting sun suddenly pierces the clouds, casting golden light. It illuminates the familiar Kondaruth plains in the distance. His gaze fixes on the mountains even even farther beyond. Behind that mountain lies his homeland. Elgen quietly recounts the legend of the Northerners' tall stature. He says they are descendants of Metis, the continental deity, just as the Melmorata people serve the sun goddess Karia. Northerners also see themselves as the continuation of the Earth's bloodline. Griseda notices that his hometown is located near the plains. He admits that while war reports spread quickly, they did not reach deep mountain villages. That isolated peace preserved the elderly and children. She regrets that he has not been able to take time to visit his homeland. Yet he says that returning as quickly as possible is what matters most right now. She cannot understand why he is so persistent. She had threatened to expel him from the castle. She asks what kind of reward he truly seeks. He stares at Griseda blankly and falls silent. Hildegard's face quietly surfaces in his mind. Finally, he says in a low voice that he only wishes to continue staying at the castle. She presses again for the truth about what happened with the witch. He states it is a private matter unrelated to the castle. She sighs and postpones further discussion of this topic. As night deepens, they find a sheltered spot to make camp. Griseda focuses on building a fire. Elgen unexpectedly finds a wine pouch in his pack, a gift from the merchant caravan. The two raise their cups by the campfire and drink together. He mentions how the temperature drops sharply beyond the plains. She calmly states that she knows this place is cold. When he asks when she has been here before, she suddenly falls silent. Realizing her slip, the atmosphere becomes heavy. He gathers courage and asks about how the war began. He is curious about the kingdom's version of this history. She slowly speaks the place name Tolteca. She also mentions the legend of Princess Marina circulated among soldiers. 50 years ago, the two nations formed a political marriage. Control of Tolteca for a century had just been granted to the north. Princess Marina then died suddenly and unexpectedly. Land disputes began from that point. The north, lacking food in winter, treasured this fertile land. Conflicts between settlers and natives gradually escalated. The murder of the late king became the final straw that crushed peace. Griseda scoffs that the living blame spirits dead for half a century. She quietly reveals that land is her homeland. Silver hair is the most common hair color there. He assumes she became a knight to avenge her parents. She clarifies that her parents simply died in an ordinary carriage accident. Natural strength and family support led her onto the path of knighthood. She admits she did not personally feel the cruelty of war at first. Not until the royal capital was besieged did she truly experience the approach of disaster. She apologizes for bringing up heavy matters from the past. He shakes his head, indicating he was the one who asked. She gazes at the firelight and says that as a Melmorata person, she only prays that misfortune will never befall her family. The campfire crackles in the night, illuminating their profiles. Griseda's thoughts drift back to her sister's childhood appearance. In her memory, Aineta runs joyfully into her embrace. She had the simple wish that her sister would come home to visit often. Panicked shouts from passersby shattered the usual tranquility. News that the royal capital was surrounded by enemy forces triggered panic among everyone. Young Aineta asked in confusion what being surrounded meant. Griseda concealed the cruelty of war with a warm embrace. She explained softly that being surrounded was like this game of hugging tightly. She had wanted to keep her sister forever away from the darkness of the world. Yet now she had witnessed the most gruesome scenes with her own eyes. In the flickering firelight, Griseda's eyes fill with guilt. She quietly expresses gratitude for how Elgen cared for her sister in the village. Yet he recalls the kindness of Aineta offering him food when they first met. He admits it was always Aineta who cared for him as he wandered. That seemingly fragile girl possesses fearless courage. It is precisely because she is protected that she can maintain this pure strength. He thinks of his own solitary childhood. He suggests softly that she only needs to be by her sister's side when she is sad. As the wine takes hold, he finally cannot support himself and lies down. In his haze, he thinks again of the figure that lingers in his thoughts. He asks if she has ever seen the legendary Sun Witch. Griseda's motion of raising her cup freezes instantly, guiltily averting her gaze. She claims her memory is hazy. She urges him to rest quickly in preparation for tomorrow morning's journey. Watching his sleeping form, she cannot help but sigh deeply. Memory carries her back to the day she first joined the Wild Eagle Army. Inez cheerfully welcomed this tall newcomer. She enthusiastically introduced the camp environment and important points to remember. She specifically warned that the commander's tent must not be approached casually. It was the dwelling of the legendary Knight of the Sun. A sudden bout of stomach pain caused Inez to leave hastily. A call from inside the tent made Griseda's heart race. After a moment of hesitation, she carefully lifted the tent flap. She stammered an explanation that Inez had left temporarily. Through the misty vapor came a request for a towel. Griseda entered nervously with her eyes closed, but when she saw that figure clearly, her eyes widened in shock. Despite years of crossing battlefields, Hildegard bore not a single scar. This image became forever branded in the depths of her memory. Young Hildegard lay on her back on the soil of her homeland. The fiery red sky merged with the blood-colored earth. Wherever she looked, everything was a searing crimson. Cooking smoke drifted from the distance with a familiar scent. She realized it was time to go home for dinner. Flocks of crows issued ominous cries. More terrible sounds mingled with the cacophony. cacophony. Deafening hoofbeats approached from the distance. Black-clad knights descended like storm clouds. Bony fingers pointed in the direction behind her. The knights began seizing all red-haired children. In her memory, a woman with a blurred face was screaming. Hildegard ran desperately barefoot across the scorching earth. In the end, she was seized by a hand like iron pincers. She clawed fiercely at his face with her nails. What she received in return was a heavy blow. Her small body crashed into an ancient stone monument. Blood seeped from the back of her head, staining the stone red. The monument suddenly trembled violently. Blinding golden light burst from the cracks. The light wrapped around her entire body like flowing water. Finally, it converged into her eyes. The man panted heavily and conferred with his companions in low voices. He ordered viciously to take this child away. She was roughly hoisted onto a horse. In her memory, the woman's hoarse screams gradually faded into the distance. The darkness of the sack shrouded all her senses. After a long, jarring journey, she finally arrived at the royal capital. The high priest was urgently summoned before the king. A sharp blade pierced her slender arm without hesitation. The wound healed rapidly in golden light, restored completely. Everyone was stunned speechless by this miracle. A terrible smile appeared on the king's face. He commanded that a prisoner from the dungeon be brought immediately. Then the sack was removed. A heavy iron sword was thrown at her feet. The high priest issued commands in the language of her homeland. The skeletal prisoner raised his sword and approached slowly. Those lifeless eyes made her blood run cold. Hildegard's trembling hands could barely hold the long sword. The soft sound of blade meeting blade left her in panic. Instinctively, she turned toward the king with a pleading gaze. But in that distracted instant, her weapon was struck down violently. A heavy fist immediately crashed down upon her head. She threw herself into the arms of the old man beside her, sobbing in pain. The king stopped this absurd test with displeasure. The high priest pointed out regretfully that she required systematic training. The king turned and announced they would first teach her basic language. He appointed Bertram to be responsible for her elementary education. He mocked that his crippled legs were perfectly suited for this task. The prisoner who had just attacked let out a contemptuous sneer. The scabbard jabbed maliciously at the back of her trembling head. Startled, she leaped up like a wild animal and bit his ear. Piercing screams echoed throughout the entire training ground. Bertram hurried forward to separate the two struggling figures. The prisoner clutched his bleeding ear, cursing furiously. Yet the king showed a satisfied smile. His low laughter made Hildegard's entire body go rigid. He leaned down and asked if she knew why she was here. She urgently asked in a foreign language about the villagers' whereabouts. The king's eyes darkened as he accused her of stealing something important. He swore through clenched teeth that he would reclaim what was lost. He used the villagers' lives as leverage to force her loyalty. He promised wealth and honor once the task was accomplished. When he asked her name, he discovered her memory was blank, so he personally bestowed the name Hildegard Alesius. At tea gatherings, nobles whispered about this curious tale. They worried that magic would tarnish the honor of this nation of knights. Albrecht cautiously maintained a neutral stance. Bertram arrived punctually at Hildegard's room to teach her. He looked up to find no one there. Just as he wondered, sharp pain shot through his thigh. Hildegard emerged from behind the door, stabbing a dining fork into his leg. When she looked up, fear and defiance mingled in her eyes. The next second, Hildegard turned and ran wildly outside. At the other end of the corridor, Reynard's cheerful humming drifted on the breeze. He was in good spirits about his rare outing to play. He was about to ask his maid about details of rumors in the royal capital. Hildegard's wind-swift figure suddenly collided with him. Sharp pain in her ankle sent her rolling across the ground several times. Reynard stared in horror at the figure lying motionless on the ground. He thought she had met with misfortune, but she suddenly rose and activated her magic to heal the wound. Delight instantly flashed in Reynard's eyes. Bertram rushed over anxiously and scooped her up. He apologized to the young prince with a bitter smile that he could not stay longer. Reynard knowingly watched them hobble away. As the maid frantically checked whether he was injured, she discovered the wooden knight on horseback had broken its left leg. Hildegard returned to her room sulking. Bertram gently reasoned that this was a necessary adjustment process. He brought out the writing she was to study today, but met with firm refusal. She suddenly hurled the book hard at his chest. Finally, exhausted, she collapsed at the desk. As Bertram limped closer, a gentle knock sounded outside the door. Reynard's maid arrived gracefully bearing elegant pastries. Bertram quickly signaled not to disturb Hildegard, who appeared to be dozing. Yet the sweet fragrance made her nostrils twitch involuntarily. When she heard the mention of lemon cake, her eyes lit up suddenly. She reached out impatiently to grab the golden pastry. Bertram watched her greedy expression and pondered silently. Perhaps she should understand sooner the heavy burden on her shoulders. As dusk deepened, he rose to take his leave, saying he would see her tomorrow. Yet Hildegard clumsily gestured about what she had seen during the day. She inquired about the true identity of that long-haired child. Bertram informed her gravely that it was Reynard, the late king's only son.